I need to get Mike to fix that video. It just stops really, really quickly. Good evening, everyone. You can see we've had a slight delay. Let me know if you can hear me. I know it's Mike that usually starts this off, so please ping in the chat to make sure I'm actually going live and not just talking to myself like a complete and utter waffle. Yes, you'll notice the slight change up tonight. Mike is running a little bit late. He's got some family things he's got to attend to. And we were just having some slight internet problems. Gareth is beaming in live from Wales, which apparently doesn't own internet. So we were just having to sort that a little bit. But nice to see so many people on early. Yes, you're right, Dave Fackerson. We are never on time. We're not that bad. Only a couple minutes late. Great to see so many of you on. So, thank you very much, Danny. Mike, the sound's good. Okay, awesome. You can all hear me. So yeah, Dave, nice to see you. You have got a little brown dog, I think, in your glass tonight. You were saying further up. We have got Willis. Oh, Willis. Well, I wasn't going to mention your lost whiskey, but you did bring that up. And that brings me to a point for all you guys that I bumped into at the Fife Whiskey Festival. It was so lovely to see you. Thank you for coming up and saying hello to me. I'm sorry if I hugged you, but if I have more than 2 whiskeys, you are going to get hugged. Hello to the other Roy. We've got Richard, we've got Ryan, we've got loads of you guys in the chat tonight. So thank you very much for joining in. Let us know what's in your glass. So tonight, on brand, I'm going to go with one of the distilleries that the guys have been involved with. So we're going to go with Nicknean. And because it's International Women's Day on Saturday, I thought it would be a double celebration. So that's what's in my glass tonight. However, we're going to get the guys on, so give me 2 seconds and we will bring on Bari and Gareth and we'll say hello to the guys. Hello, welcome to Blether. We got there.
Hi, Kat. The phone's doing its job, the laptop wasn't.
No, yes, it's so much better. We can hear you, we can see you in all your glory, so fantastic.
Nice.
Although, I mean, Barry's backdrop is a little bit more impressive than yours. I mean, it looks lovely. I love a plant, but that's a pretty nice bookcase you've got behind you there, Barry. That's quite impressive.
This is Organic Architects HQ, so we've got some mostly ones that we've worked on or done wee bits and pieces for that we've got bottles for in the background. So it's always good when you get a wee opportunity to get a wee toot on some of them as well.
Definitely. Well, do you know, that brings us right round to it. So why don't we go with who are you, what do you do, and what's in your glass? So let's start with what's in your glass, and then you can introduce yourself. So we'll start with you, Barry, just because I made you talk first. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can go to the guys.
And my glass is one of the Ardnamurchan sherry casks, which is where are we? Over here.
Oh, you did it well. It went off air.
No, practice, and I got it wrong. So yeah, Ardnamurchan was the first distillery that we did as a practice, and genuinely one of my favourite drams as well. So got the sherry cask tonight. I actually really like the Midgie that they did last year?
Yeah.
And also the McLean's Nose, because I'm a bit of a cheapskate. I very much like the McLean's Nose. So yeah, so we're Organic Architects, and Gareth was one of the founders here. So we've been kind of designing distilleries for around, I think, 12, 13, 14 years maybe. And just, yeah, Ardnamurchan was the first. Then we did Lindores Abbey and Nicknean around the same time. Just finished Benbecula. We've got Castletown Mill on site at the moment. A few bits and pieces in for planning. Done some work over in Ireland as well. We did a heat pump distillery over in Ireland. We've looked at a few further afield as well, which is always interesting. And yeah, just busy with kind of nice craft kind of sized distilleries.
Fab. All right, so that's Barry. That's what's in his glass, and that's what he does. Over to you, Gareth.
What am I drinking?
Yeah, what's in the glass?
Scotch Malt Whisky Society. I want to say generic Spanish, but you know they did the sherry thing at the end of last year, and I love your sherry bombs. I love a sherry, so that's what I'm drinking. So what I do, Barry's explained what the practice does. About 18 months ago, I set up on my own as well. And so I still help the practice looking after clients and distilleries, and we go back and back and back to places like Lindors. You know, we're never away from the place. And I do project management for distillers now. So I help people with early stage business plans, setting up bottling businesses, anything. I say to people, if you want to be a distiller, I'll get you the team together that does it. I'll deliver the team. Recently with a job down south, we've just won back the land to start another distillery that had been sold on. And then the one that I'm spending a lot of time, you mentioned, Kat, earlier on, Inverurie Distillery right next to you. So the future Inverurie Distillery, which we haven't really gone public with yet. The planning application's gone in, so we can talk about it. But it's going to be a single estate distillery. So it's a large estate, and there's going to be probably biomass on site. There's going to be venue. There's going to be small maltings. It's going to be fully distilled on the site. So a really exciting opportunity there. I can't think of many single estate distilleries. So that's what I really love doing. It's trying to find the angles when somebody wants to distill. It's trying to find the new aspects to what they might do and then teasing them out. And then both Bari and I do the same things with the land. It's finding what's the most suitable energy source for places that are sometimes buried far in the middle of nowhere. How do you get the barley in? Where does it come from? What's the way of supplying everything, and the energy mix and the decarbonisation of things as well, which is going on at the moment. The new technology is really exciting. So you've got heat pump technology, and you've got something called MVR, which is taking the steam, the heat from the steam, and repressurizing it and put it back into the boilers. So years ago, distilleries were quite wasteful when energy was cheap. The whole industry now is getting more energy efficient. So that's another thing that we specialize in doing, is working with people to save energy. And you can really kind of almost half the cost of a distillery's output, which you can imagine is really, really important nowadays when everybody's so cost pressured with the cost of energy, and the cost of energy goes into barley, and the cost of energy goes into malt. So yeah, there's a lot to do, and it seems like it's developing very quickly. And as Bari said, we've been doing it for 13 years, but it's almost accelerating at this stage what we now do.
That's really interesting. I can't remember how you guys came onto my radar, but I think I'd heard about you through work or something, or somebody had said maybe like they were going to cut you guys, maybe going to come past and visit or something. I can't remember what it was. Then I started looking into you guys. I was like, wait, how have I never heard of you before? Because you've literally like been involved in like some of my favorite distilleries. But I think when you see a building and you think, wow, that's amazing, you don't often just then say, I'm going to Google who the architect was, because I don't know. I mean, maybe people do, but I think you kind of get lost in like the brand and the story and location and terroir and all this stuff. And you don't necessarily think right back to like the sort of basics of who designed this. So yeah, it's so interesting to see what you guys have been involved with. But yeah,
I think it's something like although we're like, well, I'm organic architects. Like what we do is in advance of what an architect would traditionally offer in terms of like our specialism really is distillery. So we've got a lot of specialist knowledge around that. Like neither of us have run a distillery, but Gareth did a qualification in distilling during lockdown, and so we try and kind of push that we know it kind of inside out, which gives us a kind of step ahead when you're going to design a building or you're looking at the business plan and how it all kind of ties together. And that, because they're maybe a 10-year project that you're funding. It's not just funding a building and then putting some distilling kit in it. You need to know how much your operational costs are over kind of 10 years or whatever to make it really kind of stack up.
Yeah, because I was going to ask that as well, actually. I mean, to build a distillery, you'd have to have an understanding of how distilling works, because you're obviously going to have to set everything, or design a distillery, sorry, you're going to have to set everything out in a sort of logical kind of format so that it all kind of works in terms of production. But I mean, like some of the distilleries you've been involved with, things like Lindor's, you know, you're kind of working on a historical site. I mean, did you run into problems like digging and finding, like, I don't know, relics that you weren't allowed to do anything with? Like, whoops, there's the monks.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at the Lindor's because it popped up to me today, a photo from 10 years ago yesterday of us at Lindor's before the buildings were converted. So it's just the old farm buildings there and the Abbey. And I was looking at what Historic Scotland said in the planning application, and they said it's a scheduled ancient monument. And we spent a lot of time working for them, but they were really pragmatic, and they said, yes, it's going to impact upon the Abbey, but it's all about the story of the Abbey. And so on balance, it's going to bring more people in. So it's a benefit to the historic, you know, structure. So that's one side of things. But at Lindor's, at Ardnamurch, and at McNean, we worked with Jim Swan, you know, who's an industry legend. And so I spent about 5 years literally traveling all over the world with Jim and soaking up a lot of what was in his mind in terms of the technology, the finishes, even the size of the stills, you know, the size of the line arms. He always did a 3.6 meter long line arm back then. And then at Lindor's, it was his idea to do the big wash still and then the split spirit stills. There's 2 spirit stills. And so we worked with him. So you've got 3 stills, not triple distilled, but it's split into the 2 small stills. And then it's separately distilled for a lot of copper contact in these small stills. And so that gave us the idea then, if you look at Lindor's, it's 3 windows. So there's the 3 stills in the windows. And then our idea was we thought, well, the most important view from Lindor's is both from the Abbey side and the road side. You're looking into the windows to see these 3 pot stills. Well, what we'll do is instead of having the condensers at the back of the room, as you usually do, we put the condensers in the middle of the room so that you see the pot stills from the outside. And then the pot stills are also easily to exchange the parts when they wear out, as they do every 10 or 15 years. So there's that kind of understanding of the distilling process, both in terms of what the equipment is, but also how to service the equipment. And again, if you look at Lindor's, you'll see there's a big blank gable window, which can be, or big gable door, which can be very easily taken out so that you can service the equipment. And then sometimes if you look at somewhere like Dalwhinnie, you go past and you see a crane, and they've got to take the roof off and then take the stills right out of the center of the building to service them. So we were determined with the new buildings that they would be easier to service because we know these things now. We can make things very logically. So that's kind of the higher level detail. And on the very micro details, Barry, you could talk about ATEX rating and so on. But we set everything out with a mind to the explosives ratings that you're building in. And so then if you know these things very precisely, you don't need to have very expensive electrical fittings, for example. So you can do the job cheaper for the distiller client. So the more you know about these buildings, the better service they can be, and the less they're going to cost. And ultimately, you can actually help the distiller to kind of succeed. You can increase their chances of success because you're reducing costs quite dramatically in some cases because you know what you know.
That's it. I guess it's all about efficiency, you know, like I guess some distilleries, because they've just had to put things wherever there's room, you know, they end up inadvertently heating things up by accident that really shouldn't be heated up. And they've got, like, you know, always trying to heat and cool just because one process is accidentally heating up another process. And in old distilleries, that's really hard to fix. But in brand new distilleries, I guess you have to start with a blank canvas and you can set it out methodically. What I love about you guys, though, I love nicely written things. I don't know who wrote your website, but I've literally just plagiarized about half of it in my little notebook. But I love that. I mean, Did you write this? It's
Yeah.
really, really good. I feel like a teacher, like I'm marking you. I like this bit, this bit. So I love the concept, the fact that like you're quite terroir driven. So it's all about understanding the area that you're in, and working with it, and like the sort of, I guess, the history behind that as well. And you talk about distilleries being like villages, with kind of like each kind of individual part of the process being like its own sort of part of the village. I love that concept as well. I've never heard anybody describe a distillery like a village before, but I totally get what you mean. Terroir is one of those concepts that's quite divisive in the whiskey world, and I'm totally behind it. I get terroir. How many times have you been to a distillery, bought a whiskey because it tastes better at the distillery, and then taken it home and be like, huh, that's all right. It's like, it's nice, but like it's just always that moment, isn't it? You're sitting in the distillery, you've had a great tour, you're looking out at some beautiful view, and the dram tastes like the best dram you've had in forever. So like I'm totally behind the concept of terroir, but do I explain more about like your sort of vision and your thinking behind that, Barry? Because it's really cool.
I mean, like I think there's so much in it. Like as an architect, that you're always looking for a building to be like appropriate for its location. You know, like we don't build kind of, you know, like fashionable buildings per se. Like we, you know, it's about durability and about longevity and how it works with the climate. Like you're not trying to work against the climate. And where we're building, a lot of the times you've got extreme climates. You know, like Benbecula is the windiest place on the planet. Like it's, you know, it's incredible that the kind of there's a constant wind there, and the Ardnamurchan on the west coast as well is the same. Like the, you know, one that really I think kind of is the best example of our approach is probably the one that we've got in for planning at the moment on the Black Isle, which is the Ferentosh distillery. But with that, what we tried to do is like we use the process building. So you've got buildings that need to be a certain size to house the kit. So they need to be this tall, they need to have this amount of ventilation in them and whatever. But we tried to use them to make kind of courtyards. So you've got protected outside space on an exposed hillside. So you can have like visitors in a protected area, but still open to the elements. And I think if you go back, I know you're talking about the old style distilleries being problematic, but I actually really like that. Like what they did with old style distilleries is they built what they needed to do. So they didn't. It wasn't overthought. It was like, all right, oh shit, right, we need a bit on here. Let's like build the smallest building possible around those bits of kit. And I think what kind of changed is I think it went almost extreme to the other end, where you had these huge production facilities, which was one big shed. And as a visitor attraction, I don't like a big sterile shed with bits of kit in it, because it misses out the kind of the magic of it. So like if you don't need much height over your washbacks, don't build the roof at the same height as the bit over the stills where you need the height. And I think there's so much in it that like we really focused on distilleries, because after doing Ardnamurchan, after doing Lindors and McNean, you can see how good a job they are as an architect. Like you've got opportunities with, you know, you've got commercial industrial buildings, you've got offices, you've got bars and restaurants, you've got visitor facilities. So you've got, you know, it's a very kind of complete design exercise, and there's so much mileage in it. It's one of the things that like Gareth and I have got, obviously the Places with Spirit YouTube channel where we talk nonsense in short doses. Like one of the things, like I was putting some new ones up today, and like we were talking that the kind of next one to come out is about the kind of how you weave in visitor facilities in amongst all this kind of industrial kit. And yeah, I think we're getting better in terms of like the industry is getting better. The more distilleries that are getting built, the more people are not just putting up a very simple shed with all of the kit in it and then expecting to have people buying into their brand of selling, you know, bottles for a couple of £100 or whatever. I think there's a lot of thought and purpose going into them now.
mean, I work in an old distillery. It's, you know, like it goes back to like, well, about 1780s, 1785, we think it's kind of goes back to. And, you know, trying to funnel sort of like, you know, a group of 12 to 30 sort of American pensioners who just come off a cruise ship around about these sort of the mash tun. Once you get upstairs, you know, there's a very, very little space. And then top of that, obviously, we wanted to be more sustainable. We wanted to sort of start on our sustainability journey. So we've kind of got this heat recovery system that we've put in place. We've gone back to direct firing. We've gone back to floor malting, so reinstating the malt barns. In theory, it all sounds, you know, why were you not doing that 20 years ago? It's literally trying to stitch all this new technology around about this old shit that you really can't move, because these buildings are like protected, and like, you know, you just got to work with what you've got. And then on top of that, you then got to funnel, you know, 12 to 15 people past it as well. It's yeah, it's not always easy, but I kind of like the higgledy-piggledy kind of.
Well, that's it. There's definitely magic to that. There's definitely something really nice, and your American guests go to your distillery because they want to see something that's got that kind of charm and character to it. And it's not necessarily about being the most efficient thing. It's just that's the way that it's kind of grown up. And that's something that we try and bring into the buildings, is that it's not, you know, you've got to balance out your process engineer and your distiller and your visitor center manager and your brand ambassadors, and like try and get somewhere in the middle where everyone's happy enough, but everyone's made a bit of a compromise on those bits and pieces, because an engineer will give you the best answer from an engineering point of view, but they won't think about, I need to have 15 people standing around this thing and somebody talking, that, you know, so can we put that bit of kit that's making a noise through a wall and not have that in this room? And, you know, there's a lot of things that you can balance out. And but people like the old distilleries, like you know what I mean? Like there is definitely a huge amount of charm that you can't really, you know, you can't replicate, or you don't necessarily want to replicate, but it is an attraction in itself, the having to skirt around these things and push through small doors and all that kind of stuff.
I know. I think it's fantastic that every day I go to work in a building that's at least 230 years old. I mean, like, how many other people get to do that? Unless you're like a knight or a damsel in distress. There's not many people that get to do that, to be honest. It's very cool. Just quickly, Rick
amazing.
Oh, no, go on, sorry.
Well, I was going to say the history is amazing that we're working with. So you're working in a building there with, Barry mentioned Barinthorpe. You know, the story of Barinthorpe, the more we look into it, is nuts. And it's kind of an untold story, or it's just a few people know about it. So Barinthorpe actually...
Sorry, Mike. I just added Mike to the screen, but he's eating, so he's just taken himself off the screen. Sorry.
So Barinthorpe stopped at the time that you're talking about your workplace starting, and it went for 100 years. And there's this story of the privilege that they got duty-free distilling, that they ripped the arse out for 100 years. They just took the piss, and they had the whole region using their duty-free benefit. And so such a big amount of spirit made that they had warehouses in London in the early 18th century. Just crazy stuff, you know. And then Lindor's 1494. So to be able to say to people that come from a new country like America that the distillery is twice as old as their entire country, it's mind-blowing stuff, isn't it? You're right in the heart of Scottish history, and what's really interesting is Irish history and English history. They were all there as well. It's just that Scotland survived and they didn't. So they're next. But it's great to have these heritage buildings, real part of the history, and to bring them back to life. That's a real kick for us to be involved with that.
Definitely. I always tell our visitors that, like, we're custodians, you know, we're only here looking after the buildings for, like, you know, the time that we have. So, like, you know, and I love that about old distilleries, because you can see across the years different ownerships by the bits they've added on. And typical Scottish people, a lot of the time, it's just they're trying to get as much efficiency and much money out of it as they can. So a lot of the times they were doing quite sustainable, efficient stuff way before anybody really thought about it, because they were just really tight and trying to get as much money out of the place as they could. So you see all these little wee kind of add-ons around the distillery, and you can almost chart its history. It's like a tapestry, or like when you cut a tree through the middle, you know, when you count the rings, which I love about these.
When you realise that, what you can really see is that distilleries are just glorified farm building. You know, it's a farm process. We always say it's a way of adding value to barley, or it's either storing barley in an alternative means, or it's adding value to barley. It's just using the crop really efficiently.
Yeah.
So they are just overgrown farm buildings, and that, I think, is why we love them. They're historic, stone-built, beautiful, rural buildings. You know, what's not for life?
Yeah, no, that's a good way of thinking about it, actually. But then when you, I mean, so with Benbecula, for example, am I right? Did you just build a lighthouse that didn't exist before? And also, fun fact about Benbecula, my grandpa was, he built in charge of building the airport. This is me being a plane. I was like, what? I was just trying to remember.
The plane landing.
Flapping plane. Yeah, my grandpa was in charge of building the airport of Benbecula. But
Very good.
yeah, I know, right? A little claim to fame there. But yeah, so you had this concept of a lighthouse. It didn't actually exist before.
That's right.
Well,
yeah.
it's a bit of a long, convoluted story. The original site wasn't that site. The original site was going to be out in the bay in Loch Boisdale, right? And it was a little island. And so we had the idea to put a lighthouse on the island with a micro distillery in the lighthouse. And I went to the planning officer and I said, do you mind if we put a new lighthouse in the bay? And he said, not really. He said, do the community want that? And I said, well, it's a community project. And he went, sounds all right to me then. That sounds great, you know, put an application in. And that never happened. But then when we found a new site, which was a crab processing plant, fish, you know, just an empty, redundant building, I said to Angus, the distiller, I said, do you mind if we keep that idea alive of the lighthouse and we just put the lighthouse on the building? And of course, the great thing about that site, I don't know if you look at it on the map, there's a causeway that comes down from North Uist, and it's like a mile long straight, and the building's right at the end of the straight. It's the first building on the island of Benbecula. So if you put a lighthouse there, you're driving at this thing for 10 minutes or something. It's right there. It's so obvious. So in terms of the location and doing something interesting to a otherwise very boring building, it really works. So for all those reasons, I think it's quite a success. And yeah, it's a brand new lighthouse. It's just got a copper still in it. So one of my things is, if you can describe a building really simply, people are bound to remember it. You know, so if I say to you tonight, oh yeah, we put a still into a lighthouse, you know, then in 5 years' time you see it, you'll think, oh yeah, I remember that guy talking about that lighthouse with a still in it. You know, it's a really strong concept, a really strong idea, which is kind of our gift to the distiller, because we're hoping that becomes a really iconic part of the Western Isles. You know, that strong idea. You can see that being repeated everywhere. So that gives the brand a head start, because then the visitors, they'll know that when they're on the Western Isles, that's one of the places to stop and they'll pick it out. Hopefully.
No, it's a fab idea. Stillhouse Lighthouse. Like, I'm in. Like, it's one of the first things I remembered reading your website. So there you go. It's already worked. Like, I love it. Who doesn't love a lighthouse as well, though? There's something so appealing about lighthouses. Every time you see one, you've got to walk up to it. Like the one at Ardnamurchan. Like, just it's such a cool thing. Who doesn't love a lighthouse? Welcome to the Blether, Mike. I'm so sorry that I made you go live eating your dinner.
It's all right. No, I thought I'd jump in while I was having my tea, so I could kind of get into the zone and see what you're talking about, so I could kind of segue in. But yeah, mouthful of drive-through McDonald's. I was just checking as well. I didn't have any left in my beard or anything. So.
Gherkin hanging around in your beard.
Yeah. My first whiskey is going to taste of pickle and cheese.
Like an Ardna gherkin.
like an hour in the
Well, I
gherkin.
did-
Oh, I should have
what I did there.
poured that first, didn't I? I've actually poured a wee Neon, €6.
I did that.
Oh,
I
did
haven't
you?
poured it yet, but that's what I bought. Well, yeah, because it's International Women's Day on Saturday. And of course, Annabelle is a total rock star of the whiskey world. I'd love to get her on. Guys, if you've got an in, I'm your girl. Please get her on the Blether for me. But yeah, I love what they're doing. So I've got, what have I got? I've got I've got that one. The one at your shop, Mike.
Yeah.
There we go. Core range.
Yes.
One of the interesting things about Neon is that it's wood fired. It's the steam boiler is biomass from their own forest. And that's one of the reasons that we ended up doing that one, because we just did exactly the same at the year or two before. So we knew the technology there, and we knew how to make it work. And then Ardnamurchan did the same. So both of those make sense. They're local biomass boilers powered by local trees. And if you think of, you can debate whether biomass is good for the planet or not. But if we didn't do that, those trees were going to get cut down, put on the lorry, ruin the roads, and exported far and wide. So from that point of view, they do really make sense. The two of those distilleries.
Did you say Oban?
No, for Ardnamurchan and Neon.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said. I think you must have cut out. I thought you said Oban there, but I know it's very cool, the biomass side of things. And I don't know. Are they the only ones? How many other people are doing the biomass side of things? Like in terms of cutting down their own wood and using their own wood. Is it just those two?
No, there are a few more. I think there's something like 10. But Barry, do you know? Is there more than that?
I don't know. I think there's not many, but I think is it Tomatin maybe. I think I've got they're not kind of the biggest one using.
But is it not Brora that's just been successfully changed over? I think because Diageo had a kind of decarbonisation program, and that was one of the things one of the methods they were looking at. So they'll look at what's available locally. The thing about when you're generally,
they were quite effective, weren't they? I think Diageo were quick off the mark with putting a bit of money into distilleries and the sustainability and things.
Well, I also
they've maybe got quite deep pockets.
Yeah. One day we're going to wake up to find that every distillery is going to put an S, like something like S for sustainability on their bottles. And I always say to new distillers, I say, you're just going to have to get ahead of the game, because say Diageo do that with all of their brands. And I did actually hear someone quote that back to me in a meeting recently. That's just going to change the industry overnight, and if you don't develop with sustainable steam or many of the other things, energy efficiency, then you're going to get left behind if that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so it's worth
I guess
having the planning and the funding now to put that in place, and rather than have something simpler in place and to redo it.
Yeah, but it can also be cheaper. I mean, I was talking to somebody this week about how do you sell energy efficiency to places like the Gulf and India, where they just go, gas is free here. We don't have expensive fuel like you do. Why do we need to do energy efficiency? And the answer to that is because we can probably halve your production cost. So why would you not do it? It'll pay back in 2 years or something there. So why would you not make that investment? And then what we're doing is we're helping you to compete as a business against people who are not bothered by energy efficiency or low carbon. So that's why it's kind of imperative. And don't get me started, but Britain has the highest power costs in the world, and that's why we lead the world in energy efficiency technology, because being here is the most expensive place in the world if you're trying to power a light bulb.
That's why I've just texted my son to say, because we've had it on for an hour now. We don't need it on any longer than that. I'm not paying for that nonsense.
Yeah, that's the background to everything we do. Now, you imagine if you're in the distilling industry and traditionally they said 1 litre of oil made 1 litre of whiskey, right? And the worst I've heard is there is and I genuinely don't know who this is, but there is a Speyside distillery that goes through, or used to go through, 75,000 litres of oil a week. Imagine.
Oh my God.
When you hear that sort of stat, and we kind of keep it quiet, or we don't admit it to ourselves, it's a hugely energy intensive industry, separating alcohol from water. And so that's why what we're doing is so critical. And you see, as architects, we could decarbonize. I don't know what the stat is, but we could decarbonize 1,000 houses by complex installation and heat pumps and everything. And you'd have the same effect on the planet as decarbonizing 1 distillery, if you think about it. So I think what we do is really important for the ecology of the country, if you like. And that's another fact, isn't it? That Speyside's one of the highest CO2 producing regions in Scotland because of the distillery. When you drive through, you think it was just this beautiful, green and pleasant land.
Wow. No, yeah, that's something we talk about a lot as an industry. I know, like at Glengarry, you make a point of it. You've just had your new water treatment system and all that put in, and it's quite a new feature in the distilleries. So you're quite open about it because, and I guess distilleries are doing work, are being a bit more open about it. It's the ones that aren't, and just they don't mention it. So
I think
you don't hear about it.
Yeah, I think everyone is trying to do things in the background because, as I say, you'd be mad not to because of the cost of fuel. Everyone really is. And we measure what we say about it because, as an industry, it's doing quite well in tackling what it doesn't have any choice. It's not like we're wasting energy for no good reason. It's just that back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you could press a button on a gas boiler and the boiler went whoop and you had steam and it was all nice and cheap. So they built around that. And now the world has changed and everything needs things with it. So that's why there's so much work going on, electrification and reclaiming heat for condensers and all of that sort of thing. And then, I mean, Barry, you're right into that, looking at different options for different places. But the building does change to accommodate that kit now. You have to kind of extend and knock holes and do all that, don't you? I think
that's it. It's like even if you don't do it on day one. So like you're right in kind of what you're saying, Mike. Is there is a balance of what you can afford to do now, what you want to do in like year 5 or whatever, and then but like now, like the SWA is signed up to be carbon neutral by whatever date they've picked now. But like it's kind of that everybody is working towards it, and I think what we were seeing for a while was that people would go completely kind of standard kit and put in a hydrogen ready boiler, which is basically an LPG boiler that you could change out the burner for hydrogen. But whether that is ever going to be a reality, I don't think anybody is confident that. And I know what you're going to say, Kat, but like I think like in terms of like replacing LPG boilers for steam, I don't like the infrastructure is so far behind where it needs to be for distilleries to kind of do that. I know obviously what Beam are doing with a direct fired hydrogen still sounds amazing. And I was speaking to one of your colleagues at Glengarry, trying to procure some of your hydrogen fired spirit for our Spirit of Speyside.
Well done, Barry. Good advert.
Yeah, for both, but we got knocked back because I think it's very sensitive and it's not been debuted in public, so we're probably not the right people to debut this. But yeah, like the thing with everybody that we were working with anyway, even like right from small scale up to, like kind of 2 million LPA distilleries are looking at energy efficiency. Whether they're shouting about it or not isn't necessarily the case. I think it's one thing that we always kind of, when we're speaking to people about that, is if you build your whole brand and product around being sustainable or having a low carbon footprint, in 10 years' time, you're not going to have any USP, because everybody's going to be there, whether they like it or not. So you've got to have more. You've got to think about, it's not just that aspect. It needs to be very good whiskey, which I think for the most part, there's not many new distilleries that you'd say are producing bad whiskey.
No, definitely not.
Definitely not. I can't think.
I think the ones that are working as well, as you say, Barry, have got other strings to their bow rather than just that's great and let's talk about it. But I don't think nobody, or maybe Annabelle would be the first who had the idea. I want to build a carbon zero or carbon negative distillery. Most people would wake up and think, I want to build a distillery that makes bloody good whiskey and has a story. How do I go about it? And then speak to like you guys and find out about the carbon neutral or the efficiency that way. In the planning stage, we thought, we want to do that. And that's how we want to build this great whiskey. Or am I wrong in that? Do people come to you and say, this is what we want to do, carbon neutral? How do we make that work?
No, I think it's, for the most part, it's a secondary. It is that everyone that we've got as clients wants to make great whiskey, and that's generally the first chat is about what they want to make, and then it's about how you make it. So there is I was thinking like the one that we're doing down in Campbelltown, like obviously like that was very much about making a Campbelltown malt, and then it was about making it net zero. So like that's got an incredible amount of like energy efficiency stuff in the kit, because there's no visitor facility involved in that. That's kind of a pure production facility, but they're putting their money in the right place in terms of making it super efficient.
Mm. So it's always.
Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say,
we've got that delay again. I was just going to ask. It's your bloody Welsh internet. On you go.
Sorry, I was just going to finish that off by saying it's always energy efficient, but it's got to be efficient for process, and it's got to be beautiful. And that's the other thing, apart from when it is a purely industrial plant. And I'm looking at a job at the moment with a grain distillery, and the efficiency that we should be able to get into that is absolutely unprecedented for a brand new big grain distillery. Really circular process, but that's not going to have visitors. But your average pot still malt distillery is a limit to how efficient you can make it, because it's pot still, it's a batch process, and so it's constantly starting, and there's no two ways around that. So there's a limit to how good it can be. So then you switch your efforts over to making it as attractive as possible for the visitors. There are limits to things, and current technology just doesn't allow us to do it any better, really. So we do it as well as we can.
Mm-hmm. We've got a couple of questions coming in. We've got mentioning the Campbelltown distillery. We've got Ali in from Campbelltown. He says, good evening. Good evening to you, Ali. We've got Rick over in San Francisco. He's asking, would you rather build a new distillery from the ground up or tackle the challenge of turning an old structure into a distillery?
I'll take this one, right, because I have done a few conversions and like genuinely there is something amazing about converting an old building. I think for me, I would really like to do a kind of good new build and see how much of that you can build in. Like new build stuff that we've done has been kind of smaller scale, I think. Gareth, I don't know what you think. Like, but some the best, you know, like the best kind of output has kind of been those historic ones. So there is a definite balance there. But like I would just, because we've seen so many of the things you need to overcome with a conversion project, just being able to have like a little bit more room here and a little bit, you know, being able to do the floor drainage.
If only this was bigger, if only this was longer, yeah. And I guess what captures the imagination of a local community more? Is it converting an old building, or is it something brand new? Because I guess if you're going into a historic building, people recognize it and know it, and there's that.
Conversion, isn't it?
I'll let you talk about Lindors in a minute, Gareth.
Well, I was going to mention Castletown Mill. You know, talking about a building that sat in the middle of a community where, sorry, I didn't mean to cut in, but where like it's just sat derelict for 50 years, and people have tried to convert it into housing, and people have tried to find other uses for it. But it's like it's stacked granite. Case nest stone slabs. I mean, if you had a direct hit from a nuclear bomb, it'd still be standing. It's just an amazingly robust building. So how do you convert something like that? It's just that empty. Even Prince Charles, as he was, King Charles said, someone really needs to do something about this building. He's on the record saying we can't wait to see it converted, you know. And now Martin and Claire down at Bay Distillers there have put in their new whiskey distillery into it. And it's absolutely amazing because you're right, Barry, you have to squeeze things in, and things might not be quite the way you want them, but that gives you that kind of higgledy-piggledy-ness, Kat, that you were talking about, you know, where things are a bit odd and a bit strange. I was saying to Barry before that one of my favourite distilleries is Beanston, right? I mean, I must be the only person in the world that likes Beanston Distillery. But it's got, like, you go up a little, you go into silos, and you're under the silos. And then you go up into the mash tun, and you got to go up higgledy-piggledy stairs, and then you're in a room, and it's the mash tun, and then you kind of crawl through, and then you go into the still room. There's so much character from all those accidents that happen. You're not going to get that if you just build a brand new cheap shed. All new buildings are cheap, aren't they? And so, yeah, a conversion of a building gives it much more character, which is what whiskey's all about.
But I guess if you did build one of those as a new build, everyone would be like, these guys have got no idea what they're talking about. that'd be the last job.
Yeah. The cost of building a brand new, you know, concrete or granite building would be phenomenal, anyway, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's what distilleries were before, wasn't it? They fitted, you look at somewhere like Strathyla, and they just fitted things into the building that was already there. And and that helped develop the character of the spirit. It wasn't, you know, nowadays you probably look at the spirit you want to create and build back from that. How do we produce that style of spirit? Whereas originally 200 years ago, it was like, well, we're going to build a distillery in this farm building, and that what you could fit in and what shape and style of stills or you know, all that was led to a spirit.
One that comes to mind when you talk about that, Mike, is like I'm from Tobermory, over a Mull, and I went for a tour there a couple of years ago, and like they kind of upsized their mash tun. I think they'd gone from like, I don't know, like 5 ton maybe to 7 or something like that. But like they didn't have enough room in the distillery, so they just kind of knocked the side out of it, put the new thing in, and then it's got this really weird, like kind of faceted bit of wall that gives you enough room to walk around the mash tun. Like it's just jammed in, but it's like that. There is something kind of charming about that, and I think when you're doing something new, you can't lose those little moments in a building. So, like our job on a new build is trying to find like what are those little bits that people will remember, that they're not just going to a modern production plant. Like there's something in there that might not be quite as you would imagine it or the most efficient or whatever, but it's got something special about it.
Yeah. A good example of that is
I have been trying to figure sorry, carry on.
That
I was going to say, I've been trying to figure out where Barry's from. I knew you were West Coast. I just couldn't quite place where you were. And then you said Mull. I was like, there we go.
Yeah. So you had Ian from Tyree on as well a couple of weeks ago as well. So
Yeah.
I know you.
Yeah, they have done something fantastic. They're all about sort of small farm kind of building distilling. Like they literally just have like a bag in an old sherry butt that they're just mashing into. Like I just love how mad that is.
Well, I mean, like, if you've
And the
ever
whole
been to Tyree,
I haven't. I'd love to go out. The whole time he's talking to us, like there's bloody cats just eating him. He's just like, she loves being petted, and the cat's just like biting the crap out of him. They are fantastic. I absolutely love it. But yeah, no, I've been trying to pinpoint your accent for it because I was going to think he's definitely West Coast, but you don't have like the sort of Isla vibes. But yeah, there you go. Mull, beautiful, so beautiful. I used to live on Ling, so not too far from Mull.
nice.
I've got to mention the West Coast at one point. So do you know what's the story Ballamore?
Yes.
Like right, you know Edie McCready? I used to be her housekeeper. There you go.
Really? That is a claim. That is a claim to fame. Fair enough. My grandpa's house was next door to Spencer the painter. There you go.
I think you've just trumped my story.
I don't think anybody's winning here, Kat. I don't think anybody's winning.
I mean, being a
you were
painter
worried
in Ballamore must be quite a feat, though, because you've got to keep all those houses looking good, don't you?
Richest man in town.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, what nonsense. For everybody that's watching that's not from Scotland and like our age, good luck understanding what the hell we're talking about.
Google Ballamore. Or
What's
YouTube
the
it.
story of Ballamore?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a classic.
We've got...
Anyway, sorry, back on track.
Yeah. Dave is asking, how much would it cost to build a distillery? And I guess that's quite an open-ended question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, there's so many variables and moving parts. Like, you know, you used to kind of work on ratios of like equipment to building, but even now, like it just doesn't exist anymore. Like if you want to put in like MVR technology into your kit, you know, you've added this much onto that, and if you're converting a building, you know, you might save on some bits and then have to pay more on other bits. And it's like people ask us that all the time. Like, you know, they come and say, right, we want to do like a 400,000 LP distillery. Like, how much is that going to cost? And it's kind of, as it like so many moving parts to it that.
But what's the cheapest distillery budget you've had to work with then, and what's been the highest? Is that
it depends what you mean. If you mean the budget, what they started with, and then what it went to be realistic.
Yeah. I could come to you and say, I want to build a distillery for 100 quid. What's it going to cost? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like it does. Like I think if you're looking at, say, like a shed, you know, like you might be, I don't know, like probably maybe like £2,000, £2,500 a square meter, you know, and you probably need 800 square meters, say, for a reasonable size distillery. But then that, you know, then you want to do some nice fit out for your tasting rooms. So, you know, you might double that, triple that, quadruple that, you know, so that it does, you know, like you kind of really need to sit down and work out what it is the client wants, because it's another thing that, like Gareth and I talk about it quite often, is that you never get the same brief. Like, you know, a distillery, there's no such thing as a distillery. There's
Yeah.
somebody who wants to make spirit and not have any visitors, or somebody who wants to have a lot of visitors and not make much spirit, and everything in between. So it's really trying to unpick what the client is asking for, and they don't always know that either. You know, like we are working mostly with inexperienced distillery owners. You know, they might have experience of being distillers or running distilleries or managing visitor centers or X, Y, and Z. But you know, we're not doing things for like a Diageo where they've got a team of brand advisors and you know, they've got all of those people in the mix. So you kind of have to really work to unpick what they're actually asking you for if they come in and say they want a distillery.
That's quite cool. And
So
do you have people who just woke up one morning with a dream and say, I want to build a distillery, and come to you and say, yeah, I've got X amount of millions of pounds. Dave at home has got 60 million pounds burning a hole in his back pocket. He wants to build a distillery.
That's true.
No, but you know him, give us a number.
Do you know what happened at lockdown is we were working on a number of jobs, and because distilleries are people's dreams, like they can be speaking to us for years and years and years,
Right.
maybe looking for a site or, you know, wait for things to fall in place or finding the money or whatever. And then lockdown happened, and all these people who had all these dreams suddenly had too much time on their hands. And we were so busy. We basically, when it got to Christmas in 2020, we had to order people to stand down and take a break. Right, Barry? Because we just never stopped. Because all these people who were just dreaming of building a distillery, suddenly, right, there's nothing else to do. Let's get that distillery built, you know. So we got a really massive amount of work at that point. But one of the things that's interesting, if you're looking at direct costs, so we talked about the buildings there, but what has changed an awful lot in the last sort of 15 years is the distilling equipment. So to start off, you're like your smallest craft style distillery. When we started doing this, say 12 years ago, it would have been about 1.6, 1.8 million, under 2 million pounds for the stills, for the brew equipment, for the fermenters, for the boiler and everything. And now, oh man, the cheapest you could do that is for 3 times as much. And
Yeah.
I asked Richard Forsyth why it had changed so much at one point, and he said it's because the rules are changing all the time. You know, your health and safety rules, and you've got flame arresters, and you've got all sorts of different sensors which you never used to have. So to do it right, to comply, and you're always going to have to comply to get your licenses, you're now spending much more than you would have been traditionally on all of the safety kit. So you can't forget, you've got your building cost, and then you've got your production equipment cost. And as Barry said, you used to be able to say it one was linked to the other. Are you building on a cliff? You know, are you building on a field in the Central Belt, or are you 4 hours from, like Ardnamurchan? We had to build Ardnamurchan. It was so remote that concrete was setting before it got there. And that's why Ardnamurchan is these massive big panels that look like render from the outside, but they're just big sandwich panels. Because we had to do as much as possible to the building without any concrete. You couldn't render it and that sort of thing. And you had the midges from hell, so you didn't want to get people to rendering things on the West Coast.
People worked faster to get out of the midges, didn't
they? So a lot of different challenges. Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned Ardnamurchan, because that's just what I've poured as my second run. So that is a 6-year-old Ardnamurchan single cask. I can't tell you too much about it because it's still in the pre-release sample stage. But there was Nick Nean and there was Ardnamurchan. I thought I'd grab them for tonight's chat because they fitted in quite nicely.
Yeah, brilliant.
Like, going back to just that budget question again, Mike. Sorry, just like that. When we tendered Benbecula, so obviously like a difficult place to kind of to work and whatever. The swing between there was 4 or 5 contractors returned prices on that job, and between the top and the bottom, there was over 3 million quid. So, like, for the same amount of building work, the same place, but just because some guys were having to like book out B&Bs for a year, and like that. So it's such a movable picture on the cost that genuinely, like, people always ask. I see Andrew Smith there. Is that from LBD fame?
Little Brown Dog, yeah.
For £6, I can replace his Peugeot 205 radiator that he was using in his distillery for a while.
I know. We could talk.
Do you ever
budgets.
just walk? No, it's going to go. We're all crossing over on internets now. My internet's decided to be a dick.
I was just going to say we've talked. We could probably talk budgets all night, really, couldn't we? But I was going to look for a new topic, but I think you were just going to come up with a new topic, were you? Okay.
But I can't remember what it was, to be honest. I just talk shit most of the time anyway, but it's fine. It'll come to me. I don't know. I think I probably wrote it down. Can't remember.
I saw from Danny. Is it Danny? So the Rock Rose Gin, Danny, that is we've got Rock Rose Gin up here, and then these bottles over here, that's actually Martin's initial whiskey releases. So he's doing a kind of series that are related to the building work and whatever. But Danny had another comment earlier on. It was kind of a throwaway comment about being like car engine designers. You don't think about how it gets repaired, but like it is something that we have to be very kind of considerate of. Is that you've got equipment that a distillery is planning to be there forever, and but the equipment doesn't last forever. You need there's different bits have different lifespans, and you do need to be mindful of like, all right, well, we're going to need to get these parts out semi-regularly over the course of if you say 100-year building, then you might need to replace bits of the stills here and there, and if you're using timber washbacks and so there are considerations of how you properly service those buildings, and if you put lifting beams in for taking bits of the stills out and all that kind of stuff. So we do unfortunately have to think about how to repair it. I was saying to Bari, it was when we first came on, or before we went live, about the Castletown Mill. I was lucky enough to get a visit there, and we were up at Dornoch for my birthday week. And on my birthday, we went to Dunnet Bay and we had a tour around the distillery. And then it was clear. Tony, I had my wee boy, he was 1.5 at the time, so he was getting a wee bit restless. So Tony took him out. And as she was playing with him outside, Claire came over and started yapping. And conversation came to the shop, and I was inside. So, about half an hour later, Martin came over and started chatting to us. And he was like, do you want to come and see the distillery? I was like, hell yeah. So on with a hard hat and had a walk around, and it's just phenomenal. And you could see his vision and he'd obviously had the talks with you guys, and construction was on the way on the building itself. So we managed to get up. I'm not sure if we were allowed to, but we got up onto the roof. I think he did say I'd be the last person on the roof before the proper work started. So it was quite big. But it's just to look at the building and a beautiful site, and you wonder how it's taken somebody so long to do something like Gareth, you mentioned that people had tried, but because of the kind of infrastructure there, it just wasn't. Nobody ever got the right project.
No, and if you think it's a grain building, right? That building is a grain building, and there's another one that we did that was very similar, and a lot of stuff we learned over in Ireland. There's a distillery called the Haskra Distillery, and that's very similar. It's another grain building. They're right in the centre of town. And it's exactly the same story. There's been all these plans and projects and nothing had happened. And here we are, we're putting stills, pot stills into these buildings, which previously had big silos in them. So they're absolutely perfect. They maintain their old-fashioned use, their original use. But now a distillery fits in them absolutely brilliantly. The amazing thing about Martin and Clare and Castletown Mill is, if you're on the roof, did you see his roof tiles? They're not tiles, they're not slate, they're cake's neck. So that thick stone, massive big stone. So people just don't build like that anymore. But as Barry says, a distiller's going to be in that building for hundreds of years, potentially. You know, we can prove it. They're all over the Highlands like that. So they should really be looking to do as good a job as they can, especially when it's a historic building like that. You know? So that all, I think, like Lindor's is the best example. It feeds back into the character of the brand. And if you look at your Lindor's bottle with the scalloped edge of a Lindor's bottle, have you got one there?
Yeah, I've got the
I got one here. Oh, you got one, Mike.
Good job, Mike. Props on hand. So that, there you go.
I found out. I heard this fact the other day. You've all got one. Wait, I'm going to get my one. I heard this fact the other day about this bottle at the Fife Whisky Festival. They were telling me about it.
There you go. So it comes from the shape of the historic Abbey columns that we excavated when we were designing the building, when we were building the building. So that's brilliant, because the building, the place then, that's terroir. The place directly feeds into the product. That's not the flavor of the product, but that's the character of the product, and it all feeds off. So that's the difference between building a shed and putting a distillery in it, and then at Lindor's, everything's thought through. That the whole character of the place finally ends up with the shape of the bottle. And for that reason, the bottle worked for that location. It wouldn't work for anyone else. There's no point in ripping that bottle off because it doesn't have that story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
it's very cool.
We do.
At a concert in a cathedral the other night, and I was looking at the window, and I just thought about Lindor's and that beautiful story of like copying the sort of the fluted edge. It's like it's so clever. It's like little wee details that not everybody would have thought about, but once you do have it, it's just lovely how it all ties in.
Yeah.
Although
I haven't been to Lindor's yet, Mike. If you need to do a whiskey shop day out to Lindor's Abbey, I'd love to go.
Yeah,
and see
I've been. We haven't done a
it's
tour, but I've been into the shop and had a look around. But yeah, I need to get down for a tour, which would be cool.
Yeah, well, they just
really an interesting tour, Lindor's, because they don't really. It's not. You don't get sat down in front of a TV screen and made to watch about this and that. It's kind of it's very much about the history of the Abbey and everything. It's like I've done the tour a few times. I think Gareth's done it a few more times than me, just because it's a place that we take a lot of potential clients there, because it's a really good example of a client who was really quite like mindful about what they were doing. Like they understood the kind of the legacy that they had available to kind of build into, and they really leaned into it. And Drew and Helen are lovely people, so like for us, it was a great job to be involved with, but ongoing, like it's still a brilliant place to go and visit, and the way that they set everything up is a good example. It's not just a standard tour or anything, like they're very kind of, it's well set up to kind of reflect what they've done there.
Because they could have gone full Disneyland with that story, couldn't they? They could have made it a bit of a mecca, but they've gone down the more traditional route and celebrate the heritage rather than going OTT on the whiskey. They want to pay homage to the monks who were there and the abbey that was there, and the story that is ultimately why they're there in the first place.
It is a mad story. I don't know if you heard the story, but the Pyrenean monks were like the Apple of their age, or Microsoft of their age. They set up, and 5 years later, they had their own shipping line. That's entrepreneurialism for you. And they were shipping these monks, they were worth the monks, and so they just supplied all the big houses. They supplied the royal families right across Europe, and Fife was just one of the places that they had one of these monasteries. And then John Knox comes in, knocks the place down, and says the people of Newburgh could build their houses from the remains of the abbey, and that was the end of that. But the stories are outrageous. William Wallace paraded through the gate after winning some skirmish. Genuinely true. And then if you go into the abbey itself, the most touching thing is there's these little graves. There's little graves, like little body-shaped things, and there's two princes buried under the altar of one of them. It's mind-blowing. Talk about Disneyland. That's the real deal. It's mind-blowing history. Mad. Truly linked to history through and through.
Well, we'll definitely have to go and visit. It sounds like there's a lot of history there. But
yeah.
I mean, the other side of that is they could have just done nothing. That guy could have chapped on our door and said, "Do you know how relevant this is in your back garden?" And they could have said, "Yeah, that's cool," and then carried on farming. Like we might never have known. Like, it's amazing they've just taken that on and be like, "Oh my gosh, let's look into this and let's create something out of it." But yeah, it's a very, very cool.
It is cool. I mean, it took them about 15 years, 20 years from learning that to actually do the distillery. So you can imagine there wasn't even a craft whiskey industry when they started to think that up. That tenacity for years now. Yeah, amazing story.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have been just about the same time as kind of Kilhoman were kind of just started distilling about that. But they did about 16 years ago.
It kind of went Kilhoman, and then Ardnamurchan was next, and then and then we thought it was just going to explode, and everyone said, right, it's going to be 40 new distilleries, there's 45 in production or whatever. And how many of those have actually come about? Maybe 20 or 30 have done it. And I did a quick calc when I was doing a lot of work in Ireland last year. Ireland went from 3 distilleries to 40 something. And I worked out it was about 1,500% increase in the number of distilleries. And Scotland went from 120 something to 140 something. So for us, it was a relatively gradual increase in the craft industry, not explosive at all. And that is maybe why Ireland is having the struggle that it is now. And Scotland seems to be doing okay.
I'll use that to pop back to a question from Jeremy Watt. He's on Facebook. He's asking if we're seeing a slowdown from any of the planned new distilleries with the whiskey market weakening a bit. I'm going to start there by just kind of answering a sec about my opinion. I don't think that the market's weakening a bit. We're seeing a bit of a reset from the COVID spike, but we're still well up on what we were doing in 2018, 2019 before COVID hit. So yeah, it's coming down. I think we'll maybe see a plateau personally, but I think there's a bit of fear mongering going on at the moment in social media and that about being a dip. But how do you guys see it in terms of new distilleries and the planning you're getting through for that?
Yeah, like I've got a few thoughts on that. I say like that. I think if you look at the kind of the general trend, like it's still, like we're still up pre-COVID. I think COVID is the thing that's kind of generating the headlines that we've got now about like drops and volume and stuff like that. It's not like the kind of curve is still there, but for most of the clients that we've got, what they are doing is they're planning for a 10-year. That's what their business plans are looking at 5 and 10 years as their kind of key points. So although there's there's this perceived dip, and like we've got clients who are selling spirit into Asia, like into the Chinese markets and stuff like that. And what they're saying, well, like by the time we're producing and we've got good spirit that's 5, 6, 7 years old, the way the whiskey industry works is like there's these cycles where you do get corrections and whatever, but because they're only at the start, they're not they're not overproducing now because they're not producing anything now. So if you're coming in and producing a relatively small amount, it's not the same as like your Diageo's cutting production in some places, because the volumes that are being cut or whatever aren't really a concern for craft distillers. Like, I know the biggest consideration isn't, I don't think, people within the industry who are experienced in whiskey, who've seen the cycles and the peaks and the troughs and whatever. But the only times that we're getting queries from clients is from investors who are not necessarily, long-term whiskey people, and so they're seeing the reports of Diageo share prices going down, and some distilleries like producing less or whatever. But so you get these questions, and if you're not producing anything now, it doesn't matter, because it's not a trend. There's not a downward trend. There's a slowing. There's a slowing of madness to a relatively, a smaller increase in sales.
I guess what's a downward trend of selling nothing? You can't really get them.
So for the most part, because people are a few years away from actually producing, I think that in the last couple of years, one of the biggest concerns that people had was the price of grain being tied, because it's kind of tied into your fuel costs and everything. So people were seeing the cost of grain going up, and I know that put a lot of brewers kind of under the cosh, because that's one of their biggest costs. Where I think distillers were able to kind of play it out a bit longer. So I think that those are kind of bigger concerns, is that the price of operation, like energy prices and grain prices, because they're one and the same really. If energy goes up, grain goes up. So they're kind of bigger considerations than what's being put in the press, I think, for most clients we've got anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think there is a paradox as well that the whiskey industry stays very quiet on. That if you don't sell today, it's still in the warehouse gaining value. So you struggle perhaps with cash flow 2025, but you've got more maturing stock that's gaining value. So your book value is going up as a business. So it's not the end of the world by any means. And as Barry says, 2, 3, 4, 5 years when distilleries are online, the ones that we're working on, and they'll start to think about selling. By that point, it's not peaks and troughs like it used to be. It's not whiskey lots and whiskey mountains. It's now just peaks and troughs.
Yeah,
like slight slowdowns.
I guess that's how, like, back in the 30s or 20s when Springbank had its huge downturn. That's why people like Springbank survived. Was because they persevered and they made sure they still had casks. So because they knew the foresight, they had that foresight, knowing that the industry would come back and demand would come for it, and they needed this assets ready, aged, because you can't just catch up. You can't say, "Oh crap, we need to release whiskey. We need to make more now because there's a boom." You need to have that stock ready, and that's why they survived when so many didn't.
And I do wonder about some of the stories that you hear. Like, was it today that they announced, is it Middleton Distillery's just taking a 3-month silent season instead of a 1-month silent season?
Yeah. I caught it on social. I didn't read the story, but I seen that,
Yeah, and then Penderyn, they opened a new one in Swansea, and that's not actually distilling at the minute. That's stopped as well.
Yeah,
is that just common sense? Do you need 2 places making the same spirit when you're a craft distillery? Does that just then go over to being a tourist-focused distillery? These are the sort of business decisions that we don't know the answer to these things. So it doesn't always mean that they're all just knee-jerking because of a slowdown. There might be other considerations involved in all of those decisions.
Yeah. The one that was more local to us was the Glenglassaugh. they kind of laid off a lot of production staff, and they were going to team up Benry production staff with Glenglassaugh.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think they were planning an announcement, but one of the staff who got laid off put out a post, and it went viral, and then there was panic, and everyone thought Glenglassaugh was shutting it.
But I think like with that one, it's like obviously if you look back, like Brown-Forman in their overall kind of spirits portfolio were cutting back on stuff.
Yeah,
like I think they closed a cooperage in the States. Like you know, so they're obviously streamlining stuff.
Yeah, there's like 200 staff globally they were laying off.
Yeah, and then I think like there's always a balance with these things, and it's trying to figure out what's the, especially see if you like with a multinational or a big PLC, is their responsibility is to return profit for shareholders. It's not actually to keep people in a job or provide longevity or whatever. You know, you get these boards that they react to make profit for shareholders. So something like Brown-Forman, like that might have been on the cards for a while in terms of staff are your most expensive thing in any business of that scale. So you need, if you're looking to maximize your profits, then you need to cut some of your costs. So I know that one. But if you look at their kind of wider picture, there was other moves were happening as well, which kind of point to something bigger than just, whiskey and malt sales kind of going down or whatever. There's obviously a bigger thing playing out with Brown-Forman.
Yeah, I guess for them, Glenglassaugh was the obvious choice. I mean, it's already been a distillery. It's been closed more than it's been open. I think that adds to the quirkiness of it and the charm to it, and that kind of cult following that it has, is because you never know when it's going to close next, and you never know when you're going to get them to visit it.
But they did seem to be putting a lot into selling it recently. Yeah. Like I've been to some events, and I've seen Rachel Barry talking about it and really pushing the kind of 2 or 3 releases that they were doing.
Yeah.
At Glenglassaugh, because it was one that I wasn't particularly not aware of, but do you know what I mean? Like that, it's not one that I'd had before. And then it was getting pushed quite a lot, and quite.
Yeah, that was what surprised most people, I think, was that they just redeveloped the brand. They'd just taken out this great new core range and a new bottle, and then the news that it was slowing or stopping production for the year. I think that was the knee-jerk reaction from the Joe public watching on, was like, oh my god.
Yeah, because it seemed like that was the one they were pushing, like more than Glendronach or Benriach. Like that was the one you saw everyone going out and talking about. So it was quite interesting. But.
Yeah, absolutely.
The economics are different to the craft guys. Really, if you're releasing a relatively small amount of bottles every year and you're selling them all, you've done your job. Can you pay to continue to distill? Well, you've done your job. You've achieved your targets. And I'm working with a gin distiller, and you wouldn't believe the value he gets for some of his bottling. But he sells it all. And so he's not really concerned about global trends or supermarkets or, warehousing or any of these things. He sells all his stock out. That's enough for him. He's a happy guy. So, each business is different. And at the craft end of the market, it's not necessarily dependent upon global slowdown.
Yeah.
It isn't to say you shouldn't be complacent, but they're less kind of wide ranging concerns, I think.
Just a different scale, isn't it?
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah, it totally is. And that's the side of the industry that we tend to work with, generally people from being bottlers to doing production. And then with Martin Clare, going from doing a really successful gin business and then finding out the massive step up going to whiskey. And it's such an interesting topic, one day we'll write a book on it. And it's a completely different industry, really. the two are not the same. As soon as you go into maturing spirits, brown spirits,
Oh, he's got a little person turn up there, Mike.
Yeah, I've got a little person just turn up. Why are you not in bed, dude? It's 10 to 9. It's 9 o'clock. It's exciting.
That's why
While
I'm
you're
in the
doing, I'm going to go back and ask a question because I've just seen a name that I recognise, Andrew Cullen, if you're still watching. Hi, Andrew. Andrew's an ex-colleague of mine, so I'm going to nip in and get his question done while we're... hello, wee man. Check your jammies. Hi, Killian. How did you get so much hair?
Listen, look at this. I'm harvesting it for myself. You see, I'm going to pinch it later.
The irony of that. It's almost like he's the inverted version of you because he's got all the hair in his head and you've got it all in the chin.
What are they saying about your hair? No, he's seen
Oh,
it.
is that a you and she? Oh.
Sorry,
I was going to ask Andrew Cullen's question. So, a wee what? My kids are like 18 now. I don't know about toys. Like, unless it's, I don't know, got like a girl's face on it or boobs. None of my kids are interested. Anyway, I am raising responsible, respectful young men. And also. Wait, anyway, Andrew's question quickly before, because I don't know if Andrew's still in the chat. So do you think there's any sites that would be perfect for a distillery but haven't been able to make a reality yet? We're getting Killian's chat there. I don't know if you heard that question.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought there needs to be another distillery on Mull. Like there's so many good places that you could put a distillery there, and I think like Tobermory's is really tight and it's kind of landlocked and it's limited in what you can do there. And I've always I think I've posted about it on LinkedIn before. It's just like why like Isla's got so many, Skye's got a couple. Now you're seeing like the Uists and Benbecula with these distilleries, and like why is there not something more there? That's what, yeah. One day we'll either convince somebody to pay for one or try and get one off the ground ourselves.
Well, we've got Andrew Smith's got £6 and Dave Mackerson's got like £6 million. So we've got £6 million and £6 to start working with for your Mull distillery. Let's start making a plan, guys.
That's my fee covered, and then what?
£6 or the 6 million.
But no, I mean, like I think that like there's no perfect site. Like there's not like every site we look at, like you've got to, like, your utilities is a huge consideration. Like, have you got water? Have you got electricity? Can you get gas? Can you get fuel there? Like, are you near neighbours that are going to have potential complaints about noise and odours? So you need to, you can get reports. You need to, like, there's a kind of a hierarchy. Like, if you could build in the middle of a field somewhere that already had a brilliant road access to it, and like, that site doesn't exist. It certainly doesn't exist in Scotland. It doesn't exist anywhere we've looked in Ireland. It doesn't exist anywhere we've seen overseas. Like, there's always, and in a way, the constraints are actually what makes the project. Like, if the brief is too open, if the site's, if there's no budget or whatever, like, it's actually hard to make a really good project. If you've got tight constraints, they're actually the thing that really make the project successful, I think.
Isn't the best thing, it's not just the site though. The best thing about many of the distilleries we worked in was the story. The story of the place, or the story of it. The Ferrentoff story is mind-blowing. The Lindores distillery, the story within the abbey there. It's crazy that we managed to build something within an abbey. So it's very often it's the background that's the the best part of a brand. You just finished that one off, guys. What was that?
We,
Oh, it's
Look at
just.
me.
I thought that was
Yeah.
you finishing a whiskey.
no, I like a half and a half. Got a fairly down that bottle.
Nice. Is that the sherry cask American, was it?
Yeah. It's just that one's been cracked. All the other Ardnamurchans haven't been cracked in here, so I was hoping that one of the Midgie ones that we've got had been cracked, but inspecting the labels earlier on, I think it's not been opened yet. So
It's one of the few offices where drinking whiskey is demanded rather than a disciplinary problem.
The perks of the industry, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's like,
Were you guys involved with Ardnaho at all?
no.
No.
Yeah.
Put that back down, Mike.
But the funny thing is, like, the industry's that small that we go to talks from them, and we meet them, and we know what technology they're using. And everybody's talking to everyone else. It is really a small community group. Yeah, and if we're not doing the architecture, we're probably using the process engineers that are doing the still design, or we're working with someone else who's working on a different aspect of it. So there's very few people actually in the country who are involved in the industry. There's starting to be Indian still suppliers and Chinese still suppliers, and we hear that folk are going across and saying, actually, these guys are really doing a good job. So there will be much more competition to the Scotch whisky production side of things as we go forward. Other people are catching up, but that's fine. It's all good, and actually make things much more cost effective for plants, for the distillery.
There's a bit of a monopoly within Scotland on that kind of equipment, isn't there? So, which is understandable. The quality and the heritage is here, but and I think Germany. There's a few distilleries going to Germany because they produce a really quality brewing kit which could be used in distilling as well. Which is
I wouldn't say it was just
still suppliers as well in Germany.
Sorry.
Yeah. You're saying that there's the still suppliers there, Barry, Carl, and these guys. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a Scottish cartel or anything. I think it's just European pricing. For this really big kit, there's only 2, 3, 4 European suppliers, and actually, we know from experience if one undercuts the other, they know that at the end of the day, the true cost of the job is what the other guys quoted, and you'll end up paying that anyway. That's right from experience, right, Barry? So
that's like, I think obviously the Scottish guys have got a head start in the in terms of branding, like what it's what people look for. Like their stills go all over the world, but like price wise, it's not like if you go to one of the big Italian guys or whatever, it's still equivalent pricing, and sometimes one will be ahead of the other, but it kind of evens out. I think, as you're saying, Gareth, like sometimes you see 2 quotes coming in, and one will be noticeably lower, but then by the time you actually go to place the order, they've kind of it's crept back up, or it's kind of evened out that way. So
I guess it's more expensive to ship a still from Germany or China than it is from Dufftown or Keith.
Well, the shipping's the very cheap bit of it. The weight of the copper is the thing, isn't it? And if you think that a pot still genuinely starts as a sheet of copper, and then it's hand battered into those beautiful shapes, it's mind blowing when you go there. And if you go to Forsyth's Yard, if you ever get the privilege of going into Rothes and seeing these things being built, it's just like going into the gates of hell. And it's guys with hammers who are just beating the crap out of a piece of copper for months to make it what it is. It's an amazing industry, absolutely amazing industry. And the skills that they have, Forsyths also do things like nuclear nuclear production and that sort of thing. The quality of the work that they do is absolutely stunning. So there's no belittling them. They're really excellent at what they do. Genuine. It's not just a name on the.
Sure.
They're third generation too, aren't they? Was it not like the original one kind of started up kind of post-war or something like that, and then the business grew from that? Like they've got an amazing heritage behind them too.
Yeah, they really do. They're one of Scotland's massive success stories. In fact, it says there's stills going off to tequila manufacturers in Mexico and Chinese distillers, and it's a real Scottish success story. And that's something. And we're in the whiskey industry, but I always complain about this, that we don't seem to ever acknowledge that Scotch whiskey, and I know we know it in our bones, Scotch whiskey is like the world's most prestigious spirit, it's the world's premier spirit. But you would think, like, my moan is, why don't we have a minister of Scotch whiskey in the Scottish government? You know, why don't we have an easier ride when we try to start a new distillery? We have to fight and fight and fight to get it. You know, you think you'd almost be welcomed with open arms to expand this amazing industry. And I was speaking to somebody who was actually involved in the wine and spirits world in France last week, and he was saying the amount of government support that they give in France, in Portugal, in Spain for the wine industry particularly, but also the brandy industry and the associated things. And so I did a bit of grok, you know, tell me about it. And right enough, you know, it's an easier ride to produce spirits and wines there than it is in Scotland, where you've got huge amounts of use and all the issues that we have with energy, as we've mentioned before. So, for some reason, even though our most successful industry is not entirely encouraged, which is very British. You know?
Do you think that's because a lot of it for years was just like illicit, and people like distilleries just sprang up everywhere, and then they realized actually we need some sort of uniformity, we needed some sort of body governing it, like, and it's just took off faster than, I don't know, like it just became a thing. Like why do we not have a minister of whiskey?
I think it's a sitting duck for taxation. It's a bit like cars, you know, they're a sitting duck for taxation, aren't they? And it's alcohol, so it's seen as a bad thing. So it's easy to put taxes onto it because everybody agrees with it. You know, we're trying to make people healthy and that sort of thing. But it's the promotion of our most prestigious product that I have a problem with. Why don't we go there? Why don't we encourage it more? Why don't we facilitate it more? And it seems like every time we speak to somebody who wants to start a game from scratch, we have to kind of crowbar the industry open and get them in there. And the funny thing is that the industry itself is brilliant. The people are brilliant from day one. We've always had such a great reception from existing distilleries. It's like got us, you know, what an American would call an abundance mindset. You can't make enough of it. You'll sell it. It's all good. You know, it just has to sit in warehouse. People are brilliant in the industry. So that side of it is the knowledge transfer is no bother at all. I mean, look at Shiva, Stephen, when they did that. This is a really brilliant story, but when they did that MBR system, the heat recovery system, I think they must have kind of crapped themselves because it was so successful. 45% energy reduction of doing this one system. So they put it on, they made this kind of white paper and put it on the internet. So there you go to the industry. There you go. That's how we did it. You guys do the same. You'll save yourself lots of energy. Imagine any other industry saying that to their competitors, like the oil industry or the auto industry or something. It's completely unheard of.
No, I think you're right with just like as a comparison, like obviously Glengarry, which I managed to shoehorn in every single week, but like not on commission, but like even going back to direct firing and stuff, like we get people in all the time to come and have a look at it, and we're so honest and open and transparent about it, like the good stuff and the bad stuff, you know, because we've had breakdowns, we've had, you know, things not going to plan, and like we're, you know, super open and honest about it, and like we just, you know, have people around all the time looking at it with the hydrogen thing as well. You know, it's not been a secret. We've been very open, and we've had, you know, press coverage. We had people in looking at it. So you were right. It's this kind of like like this sort of sharing of knowledge. Which, you know, like what other industry do you get that in? And me, Mike, say this, it's like a sort of
She's keeping it in suspense now. Every week.
I thought it was my internet.
So I think what what she was going to say, as we say every week, or we feel like we're saying it every week, is that the industry is so open and we share.
Yeah.
Not so much secrets, but information about how we you know, certainly things on energy saving or on even barley growth and what the yields are successful, and little aspects of the industry it's so open, and you see it not just on the distilling side, on the independent maltman side, and you know, you go to a festival and somebody walks up to an indie bottler and they've got a particular whiskey and they're like, oh no, I'm not too keen on that. Okay, so what kind of whiskey do you like? And they'll explain the whiskey they like. Go down and see these guys. They've got a whiskey that'll really suit you. And they're actually guiding them away from their own stall to have a chat with these guys. Because I think we know in the industry, you've got 155, 160 distilleries working together because they know that it'll come back to help them. You know, if we know that not everyone's a sherry bomb fan, not everyone's a peat bomb fan, not everyone's a, you know, bourbon cask fanatic, but there'll be a whiskey there for everyone. If we can help you find it, you'll be grateful for it. You respect the honesty and the help, and then further down your whiskey journey, you might, well, actually, I fancied that peated one, and those guys were good to me, so that's the guys I'll go back to and I'll try it. It's just like across the industry, and
genuinely, it's one of the nicest things about like what we do, like, and it's one of the reasons that we've kept going with kind of distillery projects and stuff, is because it is like it's such a friendly industry, and you know, like our clients introduce us to other potential clients or whatever. Like, I think there is a kind of an openness and a sharing in the industry, which is like, you know, other architects. You can go and meet another architect for a few hours, and they'll never once let slip anything that they're working on or who they're working with or any of that kind of stuff. But if you speak to a client who's building a distillery, they know everyone. Like, they've gone and spoken to everybody who's building a distillery, like people that you've worked with before, people who've worked with other architects doing distilleries before, and you know, like, you're at the table for a reason, and it's because they've, you know, like, everybody talks and they do give away those bits of information that maybe other industries wouldn't pass along, and they would just kind of sit on and go, well, like, you crack on and do what you're doing, and then you can find out the backstory later on.
Yeah. It's I hope we're all back. I know Gareth's screen's blank. That's gone. We're still here, Barry. So
you got, like, I've got you frozen here as well, Mike. So
am I?
Might just need to freestyle this till the end myself.
I can still hear you. I don't know if you can see me.
Oh, yeah.
We've got Kat coming back. Hopefully, we'll see. Can you hear me now, Barry? Am I back?
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, it's we say it every week. Is the bottom line is that such a good industry to work with, and it's great that you guys at such an early stage in most whiskey journeys are also getting that feedback as well. So
yeah,
and it filters right through to the guys drinking the stuff as well. You know, you very rarely have an argument because the guy standing next to you is drinking a Lefroy and you're drinking a Glencadam. There's that mutual respect, and I think it does filter throughout the community that, you know, from being at a festival, from doing a distillery tour to sitting in the bar, if you do that whole journey, you kind of you build that bond and you get that respect. To, you know, the only other kind of industry I feel that does that is probably the music industry, because it's so personal, it's so, you know, diverse, and it's so mood based, and you know, you don't fall out because somebody liked Coldplay and you like Oasis. You don't really, well, maybe you do. Maybe that's two bad examples. Maybe yeah.
There's two good reasons to dislike somebody right there.
Yeah. So and Guy, I've been champing at the bit to talk about the new project that we got announced in our little wee corner of the world. I don't know if you talked about it before I jumped on about the Inverurie.
Yeah. Well, we never mentioned it yet. I mean, I'm working on the management of that. So that the plan for that is going to be a single estate distillery at Fetternear. And there's an old steading there, a granite steading building, which is going to be converted into the distillery. It's going to be quite similar scale to McMean, really, quite a small distillery building. But the plan is to do a bit of malting on the site, to grow some barley on the site, to do the energy on the site, to generate electricity, solar, probably to use biomass. It looks like everyone's saying biomass is kind of now working a lot better than it ever has for distilling.
Okay.
Venue on the site, and I think you met the owner today, didn't you? Or was that yesterday?
Yesterday, he popped into the shop for a quick chat. Unfortunately, it was very brief because he had another meeting and he was just in the area, so he just kind of popped in to say hello. But I got a brief glimpse of the plans, and
good.
It's quite exciting.
It's really exciting. It's going to be great. So, we're at an early stage with the energy design, and then once the energy is tied down, then we bring in the process designers, and then we're going to start the construction as soon as we get listed building permission, which shouldn't be. It's not contentious. It shouldn't be that difficult. Sometimes we have projects where people fight because they're NIMBYs. You know, they just don't want to see anything built anywhere. But in this case, I think it's been seen as a really positive proposal for the entire area. So it seems like there's an awful lot of support and goodwill for the project. So fingers crossed get that sorted.
Yeah, it's quite exciting, and obviously I'm really excited because there's going to be a lot more people googling Inverurie whiskey, which is fantastic for us because we'll pop up in a lot of Google searches.
Well, I think that there's a really great hookup between the two of you, you know, for that project as well. It'll become your local distillery, if you like.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's still slightly further out than Glengarry, but it would be great to kind of sit down and have a proper chat with the owner and see where we can collaborate, because we do whiskey tours and tastings and that, and if we can help get people involved. And I think he's looking at planning on doing a kind of cask investment plan. Go up, and if we can help get some of our customers or some local guys on board, then it'd be phenomenal. We're really excited, and it's quite a cool little thing, and it's something that a lot of people have asked me in the past is, why doesn't Inverurie have a distillery? Because there's distilleries popping up all over the place. And probably it started off with gin. You know, why doesn't Inverurie have a gin distillery? Because every wee town's got a gin, and then it's kind of grown into whiskey. And now we can say, well, you know, we've got O'Meldrum, which is Glengarry, very close by, and we've got Little Brown Dog, the indie bottlers, Andrew with the gin, and then potentially kind of next year or next 2 years, we're going to have Inverurie Distillery. I guess that's. I mean, his website's up. If you Google Inverurie Distillery or Inverurie Whiskey Distillery, you'll see the website where you can sign up now for more information as and when it comes in. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be interesting to see. And it was just such a coincidence speaking to Kat last week about bringing you guys on board for the Blether tonight. We saw the social media kind of explode when the plans were kind of put in, and then realizing that the two of you guys and the distillery were completely linked, and it was like,
Yeah.
this is great. So
No,
really
great. And hopefully, I think all these distilleries kind of join hands, don't we? So you will end up with a little area, a tour, the Aberdeenshire kind of area of distilleries there, just as we got now in the Western Isles and the Isles.
The Aberdeen Trail has just been kind of
yeah,
launched.
it's so good. So I always say that everywhere would have had a distillery, wouldn't they? That everyone's kitchen would have had a distillery. I actually was in Vietnam at Christmas time, and one of the things was a rice wine distillery. And we went to, it was just a family in a farmhouse. And she had like her pot stills were this big. They were just like pots, And then she had the line arm was a little chimney, and then like a washing up bowl was the condenser. I took a photo of this micro distillery in her kitchen. But the spirit was really good. I mean, it was really drinkable stuff, but it was incredibly small scale. That's what you would have had in every farmhouse.
Yeah.
In the past. Why not? So, we're getting back to distilleries in every settlement, I'm sure. That's the way it's going to be. And as I said before, so long as you can sell what you produce, we might not all turn into Johnny Walker, and we might not all have warehouses full of spirit, but as long as the business can wash its face, that's really what matters.
Exactly. And as you say, especially in the early days, is probably the key kind of planning stage when you start to make this spirit. I suppose that's the most expensive outlay, but the cheapest part of the production is right at the start when you don't have the duty and you don't have the time there. It's get it into casks and get these casks.
That's a really interesting thing. When you start, that's obviously the oldest spirit you'll ever make. And it's the first spirit you make. And so the most sensible thing to do is to make loads right at the beginning and then almost tail off. So just blast the amount of spirit that you're making at the beginning and then tail off to perhaps more sensible production amounts, because that's then going to be maturing in your warehouses for the longest. I do financial models for distillers, and you can literally cut it a million ways. You've got maturation plans, you've got your bottling plans, you've got your finishing plans, you've got cask costs, and all of these different things. You could do Excel spreadsheets forever and not capture the way that it actually works when you get punched in the face. So there's so many options for distilling, but the most important thing is to make as much as you can as early as you can. That's kind of 101 for any distiller.
Sure. Yeah, because as you say, that some of that spirit is going to become the oldest liquid you ever launch. You look at Arran, is it this year are celebrating 30 years, so they're going to be, some of that is still the first spirit that they produce. So
yeah,
it's that long-term planning, which I still struggle to get my head around how you plan that, how you plan and how much liquid you're going to need in 30 years. When you don't, I don't know what to order for the shop next week. It's like
so much of it's so much of it's an evolution. I mean, we've got a job at the moment where people are saying, "But we don't know who's back in the job." Tell us who's in the job. But the truth of it is that you start some projects, you've got a shovel in the ground, and the funding for the entire building isn't yet in. That's the truth of it, or the whole of the funding for the project isn't fully committed. You've just got to take a punt, otherwise nothing would ever get done. You live dangerously. That's the same with any business. I always think of, you guys are business people. I always think of any business is you kind of start a business, you jump off a cliff, and you hope you get a parachute organized before you hit the ground. And that's your parachute is your cash flow, isn't it? Can you afford to continue? That's the way I think any business. And then distilling is just the most extreme version of that, where, by the way, you're not going to be able to sell any of this for, well, let's say 2 years while you build it, and then 3, 4, 5, 6 years whilst it matures. Cash flow is just horrendous. But somehow, through pre-selling casks, perhaps selling gin and perhaps selling other products, you find a way through. But you're always going to need to fund big amounts for your working capital.
Yeah. It's. I mean, it's such a scale. When you were talking about money for a whiskey, compared to even say a gin distillery, this upscale is phenomenal, isn't it?
It is completely. It is, and the amount of safety that you need.
Yeah.
The boiler sizing and the fact you're dealing with steam, and steam's inherently dangerous. There's all of these sorts of things that you've got to deal with. I mean, we see small scale rum and gin distillers. You literally plug the still into the wall. that's their boiler.
They've got an input for water. It's like a big washing machine, isn't it? As long as you've got a plug and a pipe, you can make. You're using not taking anything away from the guys who will be producing.
No, it's brilliant, but it just shows what a step up there is to doing distilling. And then you got that another thing. Don't know if this is a paradox, but it's a true fact. Is the bigger that you are, the more cost effective you are as well. So if you start small, it's actually harder to start small in some ways than it is to start bigger. Ironically. So
yeah.
And we were talking earlier on about energy efficiency. It can be quite difficult for old distilleries to become very energy efficient because the way they were designed. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult for a small new distiller to be energy efficient because the kit for energy efficiency is probably doubling the cost of their production equipment. So there is a sweet spot, and it probably is about the sort of 2 million litres a year for a new energy efficient distillery where it all stacks up. But then that's a hell of an investment. But those guys are the guys that are distilling cheapest.
Yeah.
In the fire industry.
Mm-hmm. I guess you look at something like this off the top of my head. They're local. The Little Brown Dog guys. If they decided to move into whiskey production, there's no way they could do that in the building they're in. So they would have to either move to a new premise or build a hell of an extension. And I guess that's what you're talking about. The feasibility at the start it's if you don't have that upscale ability, then it becomes a big challenge further down the line.
Yeah. I mean, I think like if Andrew comes back on and watches the rest of this, like we better get that job if he ever actually goes into doing that.
I think he's been inundated with questions from people asking if that's him that's doing the fetting of your house.
Yeah.
This fetting as well.
Just along the road from him, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not far. But yeah, so they're just distilleries on the Fettineer postcode, I suppose. So their class is Fettineer. So when as any kind of small community does, they put two together and get five.
Yeah.
But who would have known that the Fettineer would be the distilling hub of the Northeast? It's quite fun. But I loved the quick chat in the car park with the owner of Inverurie, and some of the plans he's got. I guess not all of them would come to fruition. I guess, but you've got.
I wouldn't bet against him.
Really?
Yeah. Man's an ideas factory. No, he'll get that. He'll get that built. Yeah, certainly will. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Kat has put a comment on saying that she's having a dram. She's going to sign out and try an alternative. I don't know what that alternative is. She's in the Farming district. So if you look out your window, you might see some smoke signals coming across. You get them quicker than some of the internet. So hopefully she comes back. But I apologize again. I turned up late and missed the start of it. But it's been a thoroughly interesting chat, and it's been whiskey from a different side tonight. And we've had a solid following, some great questions and comments coming in from the guys at home about and getting to speak to you and answering questions about things that we don't really talk about in the industry. It's, you know, and I guess from being such an old industry, you know, the distilleries in our local towns have always just been there, you know, especially in kind of Speyside and Islay and that. And if something new comes along, then it's you know, it's a little bit twee and new and fancy, or there's a little bit of excitement, but it falls into the here and now. And you never really think, well, how did they get there? Where did they start that? You know, how did that journey start? And we've got a lot of insight into that side, and obviously talking about the costs and the running of a distillery. Hopefully, a couple of guys watching tonight have had the idea mulling around, and maybe they think, you know what, I'm just going to bloody go for it, and you'll get a phone call or an email saying, you know, let's discuss it seriously. Dave's left now, Dave Ferguson. He was the guy who said he had £60 million in his back pocket to spend in a distillery. So hopefully that
mobile number.
Hopefully he knows where we are.
yeah. Did you guys chat about your particular favourite whiskies at the start of the night, or
we talked about what we were drinking
at the time? Yeah. What do you tend to go for? Who's the Islay man and who's the?
I'm not the Islay guy. That's more Bari.
I do like a peated whiskey. I think there's definitely, but like I mean, I think probably being a West Coaster, I drink anything. So it's I don't have a lot of standards, but yeah, big hard American fan. I do like the Islay ones. I think, do you know? But having said, like one that I've been drinking more and more recently, I got this bottle of I think is it McMira or something.
Yeah,
a birch wine cask finish.
brilliant.
I picked it up at some I think it was like the Perth whiskey show or something, and I was blazing. I wasn't even half cut. I was absolutely blazing, and walked out with like 3 bottles of stuff. And that one, it's been on the shelf for ages, and I started like it's not, you know, it's really light, it's really kind of floral, and it's just got something different about it because it's that the finish on it. But definitely, like, it's an absolute belter. I don't even know if you can get it. I know they've had all kinds of issues with McMira.
I think the original founder has bought the brand back. I'm not sure if he's back production yet, but maybe one of the guys who's watching at home will know more. But yeah, they went into receivership and then have been bought again. So,
right.
Barry, did you ever have that Svensk oak that they did? The Swedish oak from McMira. Yeah. It was really peppery. It was really curious and interesting, and didn't last very long at all with me.
Mm-hmm. And they smoke their whiskey differently. They use juniper trees and bushes.
Oh yeah,
to smoke their whiskey rather than peat. So it gives a really sweet eucalyptus kind of
nice
scent to their whiskey. It's really different. We had a shop exclusive. We still do have a shop exclusive. I don't have a bottle of it here, I don't think. Called Lofstalen Legret, which is one of these whiskies that gets easier to say the more you've had. And they matured it at the top of a mountain. The warehouse was carved into the granite at the top of the mountain. There's a sky bar on top of it, panoramic views, and the warehouse was underneath. So this whiskey was matured at 1,150 meters. And it's just phenomenal. Just in little 30-liter tubs, casks of gravity casks. So gravity cask was a European oak staves and Swedish oak cask ends. What I love it. It's such a funky, just the idea of having this little warehouse in a mountain sounds a little bit Lord of the Ringsy.
Yeah. Is that available on the website, Mike? Is it?
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. That's www. But yeah, it's and I love it. Was actually Little Brown Dog single cask. They had a cask out called Light and Brown Hound, which is a single cask McMira. which opened my eyes to how good the spirit could be. So we jumped on that. It's but what I like about guys like that as an alternative to Scotch, not as a it's better or worse, as just an alternative, is that they're a little bit more relaxed on what kind of wood they can use. So you get that kind of birch wine, you get cherry wood, and you get all these different kinds of wood that they can use to see what that flavour is going to be. Whereas if we did that in Scotland, we couldn't call it whiskey. It would have to be Highland Spirit or whatever name they came up with.
Did you know about the Spirit of Haven? I was there in the summer last summer. It was like this idyllic island off Sweden by Malmo, and it was like the Wicker Man. It was all trees full of ripe pears and apples and stuff like that. And there's a beautiful little distillery in the middle of it. Have you heard what they do? They've got this experiment with maturing barrels with speakers on them, and the speakers play different types of music. Have you heard of this, or am I telling you something you've heard 100 times?
No, I've heard of something similar, or it may be completely different, but an American distillery plays bass music in one corner of the warehouse, hoping that the vibrations speed up the maturation. But
what Whisky Association say to that? But what they've done is they've got this bank of casks, and each one's got a speaker on it. And so there's a reggae, there's ska, there's all these different things happening. And then they do blind tasting, and they genuinely don't know what music you're getting for your matured whiskey. And the one that always comes out on top is the AC/DC cask. It's the rock and roll cask. And the one that just comes out worst is the island's national anthem, the anthem of the island, which is turgid folk music. It's just absolutely genius. They just sit all day long basking in this. Music. That's really interesting, though, isn't it? It's completely interesting. It proves something. I don't quite know what it does prove, but
are they all in different warehouses, though?
Different what?
Different warehouses? Or...
No, they've got a limpet speaker attached to the cask, and it's pumping into the cask all the time. So you walk by, and it's this cacophony of all this different noise, but it's pumping into the speaker directly. Yeah.
I just love the idea of all these casks having their own little silent disco and just kind of bobbing away.
Genius, isn't it?
There's so much like marketing potential in that as well.
I know.
You pick your classic albums and just like pipe them into one cask over and over again.
Yeah. But you would have to, for that to work, you would have to kind of because you could have it that one corner of the distillery is prime maturation. If you played the great music in that corner all the time, then you're always going to have the best cast. So they're going to have to switch it up and to see if it's the music having an effect. I mean, what is the national anthem? I don't know if the island has its own little national anthem. Is it quite droll and depressing, or?
Yes, yeah, you can imagine it's not going to make for happy whiskey, really. But it's a cracking experiment. It shows what you can do. I mean, we actually built a couple of heated warehouses back in the day of James Swan, and Scotch Whisky Association came to them and said, "No, I mean, it doesn't matter because you can't use them." So the Scotch Whisky Association came and said, "You can't use these because it's not in the spirit of Scottish whiskey making."
Yeah, it has to be natural heating, isn't it? Ambient temperature and all that.
Yeah, what they were trying to do was. The idea was that you've got places like Cavallan and the Indian distilleries where it matures so quickly. Like some of the Indian distilleries, 20-something% losses a year. So if you leave it for 4 years, the cask's empty. It's all gone. Imagine going back year 5 and you've just got a dry cask.
That's mental, isn't it? I guess it's milk and honey that takes some whiskey down to the Dead Sea for something like 4 months, and it gives them 10 years of maturation or something ridiculous.
Yeah. But and then you go to somewhere like Dalwhinnie and the average annual temperature is 6 degrees, and you wonder why maturation's so slow. But that's what gives our whiskey the character. It is our crap climate. It is the cold.
I mean, I would like to say balanced climate rather than crap climate, I think.
Call it whatever you like, Mike, but
I think you'll find them right.
Yeah, you probably are. You've got just enough sunlight to see the warehouses, and that's about it.
That's right, to keep you alive.
But then you go to let's say Norway or Sweden. Well, we had the Bifrost guys on a couple of weeks ago from Aurora Spirits, and they're 6 months in the dark. They're winter. they're winter months.
Are they maturing where the distillery is, Mike? Are they? Are they maturing the spirit up there as well?
Yeah. There's I can't remember if it's 100% of it's up there, but I'm pretty sure it's up there. And when you go to do the distillery tour, you have to stay for kind of 3 nights because otherwise it's not worth it because it takes so long to get there.
And you'd be drunk going back down the road.
Yeah. Oh, they've got huskies to get you back down the road, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I must put that on the list. I love going to these places.
Yeah. We can put you in touch with Tor Petter and Colin, who are the two of the directors
That
of
looks like
Tor's.
an amazing place. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I've got a couple of their whiskies here actually. So that's their Midgard. They're talking about the 9 realms of the Eidenholm. So Midgard, I think is that Earth Midgard? Can't remember. And then we've got the Yggdrasil, and that's the tree that holds all the realms together. So they've done this great series. I think this is the first core range launch that they had.
So how old is that? How old is it?
How old is it?
It's
5 and 8 years, I think it is. The youngest is 5, the oldest 8, I think, give or take. Jeremy Watt, who lives in Norway, he's watching on Facebook. He's saying they've got a Cold War bunker for the maturation. I remember that now.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's temperature then.
Yeah, I mean, got to use it. Hopefully, it doesn't get used for anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, at least you'll have fun when you're down there. But the thing about your Kentucky or your Indian is you get this huge gradient. And we talk to people about maturing in vat. And then, we know some people, not obviously in Scotland, but they bubble oxygen through these big vats and then they pack staves at the bottom of them to get the oak contact. And I had a right argument with one distiller saying it can't possibly be as good, because a whiskey cask is breathing, it's transpiring, it's coming in and out of the wood, it's breathing through the seasons. 2 or 3, well, two a year, but I said 3 because I spoke to somebody else who forces a 3rd maturation by heating outside Scotland. So that's the wood contact sorted. You're not just bubbling past wood. But it's an age-old debate, isn't it? How you mature, and that's a fascinating side of what we've been doing. We've been looking at rick houses, everything from dunnage to palletized to rick houses, and all the different types of maturation. And so we've got into a fair amount of that, working with people who mature, who fill casks a lot lower strength than your average 63.5. And then with a lot of oxygen in the cask as well. It's not just about the size of the cask that varies the maturation. It's also what you put into the cask, how you actually fill it, treat it. Fascinating stuff. And endless art, really.
Yeah. I mean, the maturation it's kind of perceived, certainly in Scotland, as the part where we just kind of let nature take its course, isn't it? It's like, so we fill up the cask and we leave it in the warehouse to do its thing. It's not that at all, is it, in real life, is it? They're constantly checking, they're constantly tasting these casks and making sure they're going in the right direction, they're being looked after, they're not over maturing or leaking or all this. It's they have to, because otherwise they could walk into a warehouse and what? Can you imagine? Right, that's a warehouse full. We'll just leave it for 3 years and go back, and all your casks are empty, and there's liquid all over the floor. So,
I think that's where a lot of the innovation is as well, and what we're like as Gav was saying, like we're looking at giving people those potential different conditions in a warehouse.
Yeah.
But also, you look at what a lot of the indie bottlers are doing, and like the guys at Woven and whatever, like they're taking not necessarily Scotch whiskey, but like they're doing interesting things with the casks and trying to kind of push it on and see what's the opportunity and what can you do with that spirit once they bring it on board, and they're not necessarily within the scope of SWA rules. Like, what can they do with it to get the most out of it? I think that there's loads of scope going forward with those independent bottlers and how they're bringing stuff on.
Yeah, and I guess it's up to the imagination a lot of the time, isn't it? We have these rules, they're in place for a reason, and they've served us well for over 100 years anyway, since SWA kind of took the reins and guided us. But within those rules, there's innovation. There's the possibility, if you just think outside the box, but not too far out of the box, you have to... and that I mean, it protects us as well, doesn't it? It protects the industry, and
yeah, it does. Like it's one of those ones where it's like we talked about it earlier on. It's like the constraints are what makes a good project, and a lot of the times, like there's the SWA rules are big constraints. You look at the comments that came out about with the English single malt definition, and what they were pushing back on there and stuff, and you think, like, well, you can understand some of it in terms of trying to protect their position, but other bits you're like, well, it's not, nobody's saying it's the same thing, so like give them like an opportunity to push it on a little bit. I think I think that, like, when we did some work in Ireland, like there's casks in Ireland that fall within the definition of whiskey that aren't in oak. Like they're in beechwood or like other types of wood. Like, and there must be in Scotch whiskey, there must be casks that are not oak casks that are in, like that are past the age of that interpretation of the rules that will eventually come into the market. So what do they then go and sell that stuff as? If it's not been matured in oak, but it predates the rules of being in oak.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And do you think we would have had such a? I mean, how much do you think is an uproar because it's English whiskey has come out with its own definition of single malt? Do you think we would have had the same? Because we haven't had the same uproar as American single malt was defined a couple of years ago. Japan.
I think it's the threat. I genuinely think, like, from like English whiskey has a massive potential. Do you know what I mean? Like, and they would then be competing for the same resources as the same barley, effectively, they would be competing against Scotch whiskey producers and whatever. But like, when the American one came out, like I'm, like we've been involved in whiskey, but mostly Scotch whiskey, a bit of Irish whiskey, a bit further afield and whatever. So that's our kind of base. But see, when the American single malt definition came out, I went on to some like live chats and people being interviewed about it and whatever, and it's like I just didn't appreciate that in America that like there are big breweries producing the wort or the wash or whatever for people to go and distill. So like you've got expert brewers that are working in like state of the art breweries that are producing this stuff. So it's, you know, like that. There's a different, you know, like this. When you then reflect on that and go, well, like the SWA rules are all about the one site, but then if it's all about the one site, why are you allowed to bring on, like, you're allowed to bring on milled grain?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, why is the point that they've stopped, the point where they've stopped, rather than going everything, you know, you need to start with raw malt on your site and produce whiskey. But so, like, I can kind of see, like there's definitely flaws in amongst it. Of
Yeah.
they've picked a point, and that's what they've gone, right. This is the definition of single malt whiskey.
I mean,
And the other ones that are defining it in their own way, I genuinely think that the reaction to English malt whiskey is more because of the potential of them becoming competition. Maybe not in volume or anything, but that has a potential to impact Scotch whiskey producers directly. Yeah. Whereas American single malt doesn't have the same.
Yeah. You've got American single malt producers as well as bourbon, and, you know, craft distillers will never sell anything out with their own state, or will never sell anything. But they're still, you know, that catchment area is probably 10 times bigger than Scotland. Yeah. So they don't need, you know. And they're quite happy with that. They're quite happy staying within their state, because obviously the Americans have their different rules, interstate rules, and all that. So it's extremely hard. It's like me trying to post a bottle to France. It's just friggin' impossible. But yeah, I just wonder if a lot of this uproar in the English definition is kind of media trying to sway public opinion and try to get political gain on, and try to create a bit of a fervor. Because I haven't really seen it coming up in much social media chat between punters, between drinkers, between kind of guys who enjoy drinking Scotch.
I think it was the SWA coming out very publicly with a statement. Is like, I think that's the only thing that's generated the kind of backlash. I think people within the industry, it's not a concern necessarily for them.
No,
because they're doing their thing. They're doing their thing.
Yeah, I wonder if off the back of it we'll see the word, because everyone talks single malt whiskey. I wonder if we see the word Scotch being used a lot more heavily to emphasize that this is Scotch single malt rather than single malt, because we have a few definitions of single malt globally now, but Scotch might be the one, and you know, the Irish will do the same. They'll call it Irish malt whiskey, or then, you know, that might be a bit more of a marketing push.
Yeah,
I think the thing about Scotch is a nice clean definition, isn't it? One of the things that I always think about Irish whiskey is, and I work in the Irish whiskey industry, is it pot still? Is it single malt? Is it, you know, it's all these different definitions, and I don't think that does Irish whiskey any favors. Whereas Scotch is Scotch. It's got single malt, okay, blends, but that's so easy to understand what a blend is. And we've got that clarity of marketing. And I think I agree with you, Barry. I don't think that if our neighbours make single malt and it's in a different way, but it's called something different, so why does that reflect badly on us? You know what I mean? You'll know Scotch is what it is, and English whiskey is something different. I don't see why we need to argue with them about they're defining it different to us. But then maybe it is just a bit of mischief. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, maybe.
A bit of fun.
You never know, eh?
Bit of fun.
Okay, I'm just going to say hello to Mordechai. Hello there. He's just jumped in to say hello. He's been enjoying the chat on the maturation side of things. James is only warming up. I like that. It's 10 o'clock. He's just getting in the mood. So I don't know how long he expects us to be sticking around for.
I can jump on a live chat after. Still got a few halves to go. So
a few halves. Yeah. Kat, are you back with us? Are you up to speed?
Oh, I think so. Honestly, like, I was slagging off the Welsh internet, but I don't know. Like, Huntly must be the arse end of internet. Like, it's shockingly bad. I've literally chased my children off the internet. Like, don't touch anything that has a screen on it. Just go to bed. So bad, so bad. I'm sorry about that, guys, but it's always the way when there's more than one person on this, more than one guest in the chat, my internet just dies. However, I was on
What
the
if I
phone to
told you about
BT
blaming the guest?
Yeah, it's not my fault, it's the guest's fault. I was on the phone to BT today, and they said that my internet was like I'm a technophobe, so like they said my internet was really slow, and they are going to put me on a new contract with new internet that's like fast. This is the level of my chat that I understand with internet, so I'm going from slow to fast.
New internet is so much better than old internet, isn't it?
They've sold you something that's not going to improve it any, I'll tell you.
Well, do you know what? I do understand internet, but I'm from Aberdeenshire originally, so I understand money. So I was like, tell me that in terms of money. So I know that what I'm going to pay now from Tuesday onwards is not more expensive than what I'm currently paying, but better, allegedly, than what I've got. So apparently better internet, but less money. So like, I'm sold. Sign me up. So next,
all they needed to say to you was less money, and you would have been on board.
Yep. I might have gone from snail to like, fossil. However, I'm paying less. So let's see what happens next week. Oh yeah, not great. Not like the internet tonight has been awful, and like I've been so excited about having you guys. Like I've been geeking out all week. I've been like, oh my god, we've got the guys on, and like I'm like, yeah, between your internet, Gareth, no offense, but it's been shit, and my internet, which became worse. Like it's not been great tonight, guys. Chat's been good though.
The chat's been great.
I've enjoyed this.
Good. No, it's been good to speak.
It has been awesome. Like, yeah, it's so interesting. So the whole point of the Blether is to try and meet as many different people in the industry as possible. Because obviously we're not brand orientated. We're all about the people in the industry or people connected to the industry. And it's so fun and interesting to see this side of it. Like, creation of distilleries, creation of sort of like from you, Gareth, like the management of bringing all the contractors, people together to you, Barry, to like, developing the sort of design and distillery. I love it. Like, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Geek to the max.
Good.
And you, Mike, turned up eating the hamburger halfway through.
I thought we were keeping it quite level and not going too geeky as well. Jesus.
No, you haven't at all. And but no, it's been really interesting, especially since you've worked on some really iconic distilleries, like both of you, and you're obviously working on projects that are going to be the future iconic distilleries too. It's just, yeah, it's really exciting to have you guys on and see that side of things. It's very cool.
Yeah, thanks very much for having us on.
Yeah,
we should probably do like, do you know the traitors do the uncovered afterwards, and then we just go like proper geek for like when the Blether goes global, we'll do an out of hours Blether chat.
What do you mean when it goes global? We are global, Mike.
We'll get into ATEX rating and explosive zones and your zones and your what else, Barry? All these questions that we have to deal with about, do you need to you've got a bonded area. Now if you drain that, then that means you don't have your ATEX in that part of the room, and oh man, it goes on and on and on. But all this thing just saves people money, having to do all these things.
Let's get more of that sort of chat on.
Okay.
Bunding.
So
Who just wants to
speak? We'll talk about bunds.
Let's do it.
CUNCS.
Sure, that's on the Patreon. That chat. That's the.
Yeah. People have to pay for that kind of shit nowadays. Yeah. Oh, guys, it's been such a good laugh, and some pretty fascinating, serious talk as well about. I think we've covered quite a lot, and I think this has been the most whiskey orientated Blether, I can't think of a topic we diversed into tonight at all that hasn't been whiskey related.
I know we'll never get into Star Wars or any of that, or Blade Runner or any of that shit that you were talking about.
We didn't do any sci-fi, no aliens. Yeah, we haven't no telegraph poles or trebuchets. It's been
If I'd have known, I would have gone into Blade Runner. I didn't
we
realize
had a
that.
chat with Blade Runner last week with Ian Allen Murray, who was he's a big sci-fi geek. So yeah.
I think all the stuff with Harrison Ford, that was, if they do a Blade Runner release, I'm all over that. That will be getting purchased.
Yeah. But none of this Ryan Gosling crap. It's got to be the original.
Yeah. No, I'm mentioning Indiana Jones a lot, working on Farintosh at the moment. You know, we're talking about, you can actually see the base of these stills in the field, and I'm trying to work everyone up to find out, is that the exact distillery that broke the camel's back, that ended the privilege, that ended the duty-free distilling, that meant that Farintosh disappeared and Rabbie Burns did his poem and all of that? Is that the very field we're putting the distillery in? Nobody knows yet, you know, but the project should give us more opportunity to do more archaeology, more historical research, and find out if that's the very field. So really amazing stuff to get into, but it is quite Indiana Jones when you think about it.
Well, get Harrison Ford on board, Gareth. And
Yeah.
he can do that big reveal.
Is he still in Scotland?
He's got his English kilt on, doesn't he?
Very suave guy. I'm sure he can. How much does it cost to get a day at Harrison's time? Couple of bottles, maybe a cask.
Less than your time, Gareth.
I'm 3 bottles a day.
That Farintosh project must be so. I mean, how deeply into the history of whiskey is that ingrained, and to be looking at reviving that, there's so much potential for a great kind of brand story on that.
Yeah, it is. It's so good. The stats on it, the fact that all Highland whiskey at one point was called Farintosh, and then it's gone. And it seems, I actually just found out a bit more about it in the last few days, that when they lost the privilege, when they had to pay duty and it just fell over within the year, I thought that was the end of Farintosh. I thought it just like snapped like an elastic band. That was it. It was done. But it wasn't. The distillers just it's like the end of the Roman Empire. The distillers just married into other local distilleries and petered out. Didn't stop entirely. It carried on being called Farintosh. All whiskey carried on being called Farintosh, even though the Black Isle stopped distilling at that particular place. Yeah, no, it's just a fascinating topic altogether. Half of all whiskey was Farintosh at one point. Half of Scotch. Warehouses in London, as I say, just nuts. The statistical facts about that one particular brand. 26 different distillers making it under that brand. You know, huge production, and it's all just gone into your average Scottish person's never heard of Farintosh, I'm sure. It's just disappeared into the ether. And here we are now in the one field where you can see the archaeology, hopefully get permission to build again, looking into that archaeology. And just like at Lindores, allowed to bring people into this historical part of Scottish distilling again, because we're now working with someone who's going to build an open, visitable distillery.
Yeah.
So yes, it's hugely exciting. Can't wait to get our teeth into it. But we have been working on it for about 12 years. So far, that's a fact. It's taken 12 years.
I think it was 2013. Those initial site sketches.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's nuts. You just don't think. I mean, you think or we think on the customer facing side of it, without being in the industry production side, 12 years is a long time, because that's how long it takes for a whiskey to become good, and kind of most, but you don't realize it's taken 12 years to get that whiskey into the barrel in the first place.
And so if you think it's another 12 years from here, at least, until it gets good, that's a quarter of a century from starting to work. And I don't just mean thinking about ideas, starting to produce work for that brand to actually becoming quality. That's how long the industry is.
Back in the days, guys like John Smith and Willie Grant just thought, you know what, I'm going to build a distillery, and just built it and got on with it. They didn't have to faff about.
No, but I mean, when you look at the history of those distilleries, they were falling over all the time. They were running out of money all the time. They didn't have modern where you could go to the bank. You couldn't go to some high net worth in Singapore and see if you could get them involved in the project or whatever.
I don't know. Robert Pattinson seemed to be going to the bank quite a lot, didn't
he? Yeah. But the industry was changing all the time. The excise rules were changing by the week. I don't know. There was different excise rules for Highlands as there were for Lowlands, and they were trying to take account of the fact that in the Highlands you couldn't grow the quality of barley that you could in the Lowlands. So they were trying to hamper the Lowlands with the taxation system and encourage the Highlands, and constantly tweaking all these rules. And so folk were just getting on the wrong side of the rules. People were going to prison. The history of legal distilling, it took a lot of people, a lot of money and heartache and jobs lost to get to the point that there was a sustainable kind of framework for HMRC for the revenue to operate in.
It's phenomenal. I think that is reason enough to get you guys back on another Blether in the future. The Ferrintosh and the story there, I think, is worthy of its own. Blether. But it's been phenomenal tonight. Kat's probably not going to come back, so I'll say good night on behalf of her. Thank you very much to the guys at home for watching, for sticking with us through our tribulations of internet. It's been phenomenal. Such an insight. Thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we have penciled in a guest. I'm not going to announce it just in case it doesn't happen. But a wee farm distillery in Fife might be joining us next week. I hope they do. And it'd be great if you guys can watch and join in and say hello in the chat if you can. And just say good night to everyone at home. Good night to you guys.
Cheers,
and thanks again.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, man. Cheers.